Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Cabbage Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Conduit Paragon. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. As one child knew from the very young and incredibly tender age of 4 years old, all men were indeed not created equal. Some were born to be the top of the pack just by the circumstances of their birth, while others were stuck at the bottom of the food chain, only to beg for scraps and attention. This budding individual was one Izuku Midoriya, resident quirkless and aspiring hero that would do absolutely anything in order for his chance to stand side by side with his hero, All Might. That's what led himself and his mother to the doctor's office for a full scan and quirk evaluation to determine what made this boy stand out in a crowd and what would give him his chance to shine. It was no more than 20 minutes into the medical exam that our young hero-to-be was told that his dreams could never come to fruition and that he was a part of the small 20% of the population that was born quirkless in this new generation of superhumans. Quite an unlucky pick for someone whose only purpose in life was to become a hero and protect the innocent in any way possible. This young boy who had logged more than 500,000 views on single video of his favorite hero saving hundreds of people in some freak accident. Before he even knew what it meant to be a hero, he knew that the only thing that he could do with his life was protect people and have a smile on his face that would inspire strength in the most frightened of people and break the spirits of the villains that may try to continue and fight. The doctor spoke with one of the most seemingly boring and monotonous voices in the world, as if it meant nothing to just rip the kid apart without using many words at all. "Sorry kid, it's not gonna happen." Those words. Those seemingly insignificant words that had no real meaning to a bystander that may have just heard them, but to young Midoriya, there was no greater sword to pierce his ever-kind heart. It wasn't much after that he was at home, adding even views to the video he loved so much as he sobbed and rocked back and forth on the desk chair as his loving and doting mother had her arms slung around the small boy's neck as she wept with him, just repeating the words, "I'm sorry," over and over as he shivered and cried himself to sleep. The words that kept little Deku's mind swimming even in his deepest moments of sleep. A few years had passed since this conversation with his doctor had went through, but the thought of being a hero had never left. A 10-year-old Izuku was found scribbling in his notebook as he walked home from school that day, filling it with notes on the heroes that were in the news that very day. He was walking along the sidewalk, completely oblivious to his surroundings as he walked along. It was quite the slide of luck that his instincts kicked in, and he looked up before quickly jumped away as a car crashed and rolled onto where he was just standing. The book that the surprised teen was scribbling in was quickly discarded into his backpack before he sprinted to the upturned armored vehicle that was on its side, windows smashed and the metal door wide open with its hinges broken. The green-haired hero-to-be looked inside and pulled on the doors, obviously suspicious of the fact that the vehicle was armored, but he stood by the idea that nobody deserved to die. He got the drivers out, dragging them off to the side before going back in and pulled the latches back, opening the door to reveal 3 individuals. One of which was slightly conscious while the other 2 were out cold. He pulled out the 2 sleepers before coming back for the one that could think for himself. He grabbed the hand before pulling him, but almost immediately after touching the man's hand, his brain was assaulted with a series of memories of a quirk that wasn't his and seemingly how it works before he was returned to his own reality. The first thing he noticed was the smoldering ashes that came from his body, but they were quickly quelled while the man stared up at Izuku in surprise and shock. What the hell was that, kid? What kind of memory quirk was that? He spoke while the cogs in his mind worked before the green-haired stutter machine spoke up. "I don't actually have a Q quirk. I'm quirkless." The unnamed man huffed and turned into a burst of smoke before shooting out the door, but didn't get more than the door before his quirk was cancelled by the cuffs on his wrists and restraints on his ankles that helped stop his quirk because they made it so he couldn't maintain his smoke form for more than a moment. Unfortunately for him, a pro hero had already made his way to the scene after he saw the smoke swirling up from the destroyed engine and went to investigate. Upon arriving, he saw the high schooler drag someone out before going back in. By the time he got close enough to be of use, he saw the smoke man attempt to escape but was thwarted by the shackles binding him. "Halt!" The hero ran forward and restrained the presumed villain with his body-folding quirk, and reformed his head as he looked at Izuku. "Are you okay, citizen? You look unharmed." Izuku breathed deeply as he stares at the man in front of him, as he was one of the heroes that the hero otaku had written about in his hero notes for the future. Headshot was in book number. "Yes, sir. The car crashed in front of me and I got everyone out before anything happened that could hurt them. You've done well and you didn't have to use your quirk. I am very impressed with you. I'll be sure to tell the heroes about you. But could you stay here so the police can hear what you have to say?" He questioned, but it was more of a statement that he was telling Izuku to stay so that the police could get an accurate retelling of the events. It was only a couple of years after these events that had helped our green-haired hero to refuse to give up on the idea of being a hero. Quirk or no quirk, he would become a hero that all people could look up to no matter where you came from or what your background was. He would always be your hero. The crybaby had kept his head down as he fought through middle school. He was often picked on by the other students for being quirkless, and yet that loneliness seemed to be the least of his worries. His so-called best friend had been almost non-stop in the amount of teasing he did to the smaller boy. This relentless behavior slowly became a sort of recurring incident because of its frequency, and so Izuku slowly developed a sort of resistance to it and was able to just kind of deflect what one Katsuki Bakugo would say to him because of how he knew it would. Today was one of the rougher days. It started out fine and dandy, but it had progressed and school had nearly ended, but as his luck would have it, the teacher practically singled him out when he began speaking about the career aptitude tests, which were promptly ignored as the students began causing a ruckus about all wanting to become heroes. The shouting and cries began to dissipate as the one nicknamed Kakin spoke up. "Listen up, that. You're even worse than the rest of these diamond rejects. You quirkless wannabe. You really think they'd let someone in when they can have someone like me?" The loudmouth demolition expert shouted as a cluster of explosions rocked from his clenched fists. The one identified as Deku stumbled backwards out of his chair and onto the floor, and from there it seemed to calm down as the class resettled itself. He just tried to ride the wave and not stand out, and he let himself hide away until the end of class, where he began to pack his bag and stopped at a notebook labeled Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, then giving it a stare before it was pulled from his hands and burned in an explosive clap from boy standing over Izuku's desk. This was followed by Deku putting his hands on the desk and standing with an arched back before giving a nervous and fake chuckle. "Ha, really funny, guys. Can you please give it back?" The question came out as meek and quiet, which was also subsequently ignored in favor of throwing the now crisp book out the window and unknowingly into a small koi pool. Once the deed was done, the destructive blonde strut his stuff and walked to the door, then looked over his shoulder with the very same wicked grin that you would see on a wild animal that had just tracked his prey into a trap. "If you want to be a hero, maybe you'll get lucky with a better quirk in the next life. That's the only chance you have." On our young hero's way home, he retrieved his book and began his walk back to his home. It was along this path that he lost himself in thought, which was his reason for being caught off guard when a grotesque ball of slime and/or sludge grew from the tiny holes in the sewer grate before locking onto the boy just in front of him. It only took an instant before the liquid villain wrapped itself around the boy while he fought to keep the slime from his mouth, and yet it was of no use as the liquid forced itself into the throat of the child underneath him. Following these events, the grate that was previous unmoved by the villain was rocketed off and sent ricocheting off of the walls of the small tunnel that the three of the beings were in. In an instant a man rose from out of the smokescreen, a thunderous laugh before a booming voice echoed in the ears of the surrounding individuals. "Have no fear, you are safe. Now that I am here, that is." Knowing that the man with the liquid quirk had already found a new victim by the way he wasn't running away, he ped back his fist and flexed all his muscles in a way that seemed to make the hero encompass even more of the tunnel than he already had been. Following the movement, time seemed to slow as he spoke with conviction that demanded the full attention of the others. "Texas Smas." With a resounding explosion of wind, the sludge villain was unable to hold himself together and flew in different directions as globs of disgusting, vomit-green splashes went all over the place. As the boy was released from the villain's grasp, he flew back and his vision faded to black while the last thought that floated through the boy's mind was of his savior, All Might. The child with the unkempt hair slowly blinked his eyes open and stared up to his hero before sliding himself back against a wall as he stared up to the tower of a man in front of him. My notebook. An Otagra, he already did it. The neon-eyed teen spoke up, excited as he started bowing excessively, looking as though he was slamming his head against the concrete pathway. Thank you so much. What a treasure. It'll be a family heirloom. Although this statement was almost completely unheard from the number 1 hero as he began his stretches to prepare for his launch. A pro battles not only enemies but time as well. A gust shot out against the surrounding buildings as a All Might was sent flying up from the surface of the earth. Thank you for your continued support. After some time had passed and the masculine hero had calmed himself, he was quickly made aware of the new mass that had stuck itself to his leg. The young rescue had just attached himself to the hero's leg. He was screaming and flailing while All Might began pushing on him. Release me. Such enthusiasm is a bit much. The hero continued to push until the boy spoke up, screaming against the wind that rushed into his lungs. If I let go from this height, then I'm going to die. The one with an unidentified quirk spoke up and nodded, close your eyes and your mouth. Izuku's head tucked into the large man's leg just in time to not see the glob of blood slip from his lips. Following this encounter, they landed on a nearby roof where Midoriya slid down with a pale face and felt sick, but his thoughts continued to swirl through his head, questions still left unanswered as his favorite hero walked away from him. Without a thought and without a moment's hesitation, he shouted out at the weakened hero. Can someone without a quirk become a hero like you? Not many words, barely even a full sentence had stopped All Might in his tracks when he had reached the fencing around the roof of the building before turning back to the timid boy that couldn't even look him in the eye. With Deku's eyes glued to the ground, he didn't notice the steam shooting from his body, when a massive plume of smoke and revealed a much smaller and frilier-looking man. Midoriya looked up and saw the man that was supposed to be the hero of heroes and the symbol of peace, but there in front of him was a weak-looking shriveled man with blood rocketing from his mouth like a waterfall. Why, you're all shriveled up. Were you a fake? An imposter? Midoriya shouted at the man as he looked on, both confused and angry. This All Might spoke up after a few moments, once our young protagonist had begun to calm himself. You know those guys at the pool who hold in their gut just to look good? It's like that. Their conversation continued and went on about the reasons why he couldn't maintain his hero form and the injury that caused it. This led back to knife the Izuku knew would be stabbed through his gentle heart. The words of his hero as the conversation came to a close. Without power, can one become a hero? No, I should think not. With that statement, he walked to the door that led to the building's set of stairs to the ground floor while Midoriya's world fell apart around him and he receded into a depression of sorts. Thinking deeply, our young protagonist fell into himself as he began to think over what he was just told. His brain had stopped registering his surroundings in favor of putting more brain power into his thoughts, and so he didn't notice as All Might's form left the roof and receded into the stairwell, leaving Midoriya to his own business. When a loud explosion rang out and shook the surrounding buildings, drawing the attention of both individuals. Different thoughts running through their heads as one raced to the scene and the other took a step only to stop before the other left the ground. Stopping in his tracks before refocusing and leaving the building while being lost in his thoughts. It took some time, but Izuku arrived at the scene of the massive explosion that had previously rocked the city. An unconscious decision he assumed because of his near obsession with collections information on his favorite pro-heroes. He approached the scene and snuck through the crowd that had gathered between the towering buildings before seeing the mutant quirk user that had attacked him before he was saved by All Might. His eyes homed in a moving outline as another set of explosions rocked the area and the shadow inside was pushed outside of the mutant for just a moment. As his level of stress increased, there was a stream of smoke that was coming from the burning building and into the fearful teenager filled him with an unknown energy. All of this happened in the span of a second or so for Izuku, and it took him even less time to react and run. He had no idea what was happening. His body was just flying towards the pile of slime before he reformed about 10 feet from the being, still running. The surrounding pros reacted as soon as their minds realized the situation, and they immediately tried to catch up to him, but it was of no use. He was too far and he couldn't be stopped by any of the heroes present. "Get back here, you fool!" It was Death Arms that screamed out to the young hero to be as he made his way to the villain with haste. Time for him felt as though it began to slow while the man of slime went to strike the boy in front of him, but recoiled as Izuku span around and slipped his backpack off in one quick and smooth transition. Following the release of his bag was a cloud of bright orange and gray smoke, and in a dumb slide of luck, his bag broke open and his hero notebook flew out and luckily poked the pile of sludge in one of its eyes. Following this, the boy lunged at the blonde trapped in the villain's grasp, clawing to free him from the suffocating sludge. So he could help his childhood friend breathe, if even for a moment, so that he could continue and struggle against the liquid body that he was trapped inside of. This process, however, helped one man make his own decision, and now he was standing between the mutant-type quirk user and the vulnerable adolescent that had just done his very best to save his oldest friend, the larger man's fist drawn back before speaking in a booming voice that reached the ears of every single person in the vicinity. A hero should always be ready to risk his life. His fist drew back, and while the other pulled both boys from the sludge like villain, "The lesson I left you with? I should practice what I preach." With a mighty swing of his fist, we screamed out to the heavens as his fist neared the bad guy, Detroit. Smash! His fist impacted the disgraceful quirk user and sent shockwaves through every single alleyway and street before rising up into the clouds, changing the weather with its force. The wannabe hero was set down and received a scolding from the pro heroes, while the childhood friend known as Kakin was praised for his quirk and resilience toward the villain that he had just faced. This didn't go on for long until the boys were released and sent on their way home with a warning and a slap on their wrists. On his way home, the green-headed mop thought of his encounters throughout the day and back to his talk with All Might, but as luck would have it, that very man slid into view from around the upcoming corner and yelled out to Midoriya in an effort to draw his attention, "I am here." This was followed by a sudden puff of smoke and blood spewing in front of him from out of the hero's mouth. "Kid, I've come to talk to you about what I said earlier. Had I not heard your story, I'd have been nothing but fake muscles and insecurities back there." He was interrupted by the boys mumbling, "I just got in your way. If I hadn't dash." It was the boy's turn to be interrupted, and as such he was. "Of all the people at the scene, it was you, a timid and quirkless boy, who acted. You spurred me into action." There's a bit of a saying that goes around amongst the top heroes. Most of the pros show signs of greatness early on in their life, even as children. Many of them claim that their legs started moving before their minds could even begin to react to the situation. Their bodies simply moved before they could think. That's what happened to you, yes? The timid boy, now hunched over, tears pouring from his eyes in a failed attempt to hide how he was feeling by suddenly being shouted out at by the man in front of him. The only way he could respond to the question was with a should of his own, one full of conviction, yes. Satisfied with his response, All Might smile with pride as he spoke in a much more powerful tone, telling Izuku exactly what he had wanted to hear since he was only 4 years old. "You too can become a hero." The swelling and puffing in Izuku's eyes began to reduce as he calmed himself in front of his role model. The person in front of Midoriya seemed to more like a tall bag of bones, apparently began to remember something said a few hours ago which contradicted his thoughts of the young adult in front of him. "Young Midoriya, there is a lot of things I am willing to accept in a student and successor, but I'm not going to pass on something so powerful to a liar. You told me that you had no quirk, did you not?" The older man glared at the boy. His black scara seemed to reflect the greenet's very being, so he could think himself over. "I'm not a liar. I've always been told that I don't have a quirk. My doctor told that to me when I was 4 years old. As far as I knew, I was quirkless until just 10 minutes ago. I don't really understand what this is, but I remember something similar happening a few years ago." The freckled boy's face seemed to turn a shade darker from embarrassment. "I was almost hit in a car accident a while ago, but I stepped back just in time. It was an armored car and it had 5 passengers inside. I touched one of them and I saw memories that weren't mine, and I was suddenly smoking and smoldering. I figured it was just the man's quirk affecting me since he could make his clothes turn into smoke as well as his own body. I never thought about it after then. His face maintained its display whilst the bright blue-eyed man stared down at Deku's emerald spheres, trying to find any trickery or dishonesty in him or his words. After a moment of not being able to actually pick up any form of deceit, the blonde-headed hero just nodded and smiled at the one before him. I believe that you, young Midoriya, are worthy of inheriting my power. His arms spread wide while as if to display how important this ability truly was. While the older man was moving about, our favorite crybaby's brain had begun to fry. His head tilting and staring up in a dazed and confused manner before a quiet, "Huh?" escaped from the kneeling boy's mouth. What's that face for? It's a proposal. The real work begins here. Listen, my boy. The face adorning the man's body scrunched up and stared at the boy while his pointer finger rose up and pointed at the adolescent intensely. I'm skin you if you want to try accepting my power. The tears and snot had only just finished running out of Hero Nerd's face before his idol spoke up once more with the intention of imbuing his future successor with his knowledge. My quirk was passed down to me like an Olympic torch. News outlets always try to guess what my quirk is, including some conspiracy theories. They guess things like super strength or a strength boost modifier, and yet they are all wrong. All Might paused a moment for a dramatic effect before concluding his statement. I have the ability to pass my power. That is the quirk I inherited. It is called One for All. One person inherits the quirk and cultivates it before they pass it on to the next person who refines it and passes it on again, which results in a crystalline network of power. Izuku rocked back to his knees and looked up at All Might with only one question to make sure that he was meant to be the one. Yeah, but why do you choose me to be your successor? You may have been quirkless, an admirer of heroes, and yet, back there, you were more heroic than anyone else. I believe that it is you who is worthy of being my successor, which all depends on if you accept my offer. With no hesitation in his voice, the green-headed mop spoke up to the man that he was facing. Yes, I accept. With a smile adorning his face and a hand on his forehead, which covered his right eye. A quick answer, I expected nothing less. 2 days later, just outside of the Yui High School. Once his train stopped at a nearby station, Izuku made his way to the school as quickly as he could. He was excited to be able to see the school that he might end going to if he is able to use All Might's quirk by the time the entrance exams start. As Midoriya sat at the main gate, All Might walked through it and looked at the boy before him. All Might? Izuku stumbled back as the gate slid open and saw the non-muscular man come from behind the school's walls and then spoke up. Of course. Who else were you expecting, my boy? The man spoke loudly and with a jovial laugh afterwards as Izuku stared at the man in awe before asking something that was on his mind. Why did you ask me to meet you here today? I'm not going for the entrance exams for another 11 months, so why bring me here? Because you have a quirk that needs to be accounted for. One for All has to bind with its host, and if we don't know what your powers are, then we will have no idea on how my quirk will react with yours. We need to try and see if it'll be a detriment to you. The man spoke with a seriousness that was previously unknown to young Midoriya, but he still knew what was said was going to affect every part of his being in the months to come. Izuku began to mutter, I understand that the raise importance in understanding Mikirk, but a what if there's no point and it's actually use twasting gur time? What if Mikirk just incompatible and all might just forgets about me like it was nothing? What if Mikirk is actual isomething thought would make one for Lasand actually negate it? This had gone on for more than long enough, and so Tashinori decided it was time to cut it short and spoke up, Midoriya. You need to stop worrying about everything if you're going to be receiving my quirk. Just calm down and take this one step at a time. Izuku took a couple of breaths over the course of a minute and then nodded as he smiled. Thank you. I needed a reset like that. His back straightened and looked at the slightly taller man. All Might return to the original topic at hand as to answer the question that Izuku asked earlier. As for your question, we're here in order to test your quirk. Obviously the doctor that tested you was incompetent. I'm bringing you to the greatest quirk scientist and physician of my generation. She'll be doing a full evaluation in order to determine your quirk's true abelites. All Might walked back inside and beckoned Izuku to follow him as they both made their way to the medical ward of the school. It took a couple of minutes to actually get to the section of the school just because of its sheer size, but they got there in the end and walked into the office and sat down as a chair swiveled around and faced the two boys. An elderly lady looked to the two much younger boys and nodded before smiling. "He's a little young, isn't he, Toshi?" She spoke in a gentle way but seemed to have a double meaning that Izuku was unable to pick up on. He was unable to think on those thoughts for long as All Might spoke up. "We still have some time before he'll receive my quirk, but we have a lot of training to do. But there is something more important to do first." He took a breath as he focused and thought of the phrasing to use before speaking again. "My student needs his quirk re-evaluated. Up until 2 days ago, he thought that he was absolutely quirkless. He ran head-on into a villain and his quirk just kind of seemed to activate on its own, and yet we don't know what it is or what it's capable of. I don't want to have his quirk be some loose cannon that he cannot control." Once All Might finished with his rambling, Recovery Girl nodded and hopped up from her chair and began to move towards the two and performed a basic visual examination of Izuku before going a room that was connected by just a sliding door. She called for Izuku to follow before she ran him through a series of tests in which she measured various aspects of a possible quirk. Because quirks were genetic, they could be stimulated, and because of that, limits can be found. She was able to trigger his quirk after around an hour of testing, and it helped Izuku to figure out how it felt to be used. Just like it felt when the nerves on your knee were hit, and your knee were to JRK. This continued well into the afternoon until they had deduced his quirk. It took more than a bit of time because of how complicated his true quirk was. The activation of his secondary quirk was nearly impossible to pick up on because there was nothing for it to copy into Izuku's body. Both Recovery Girl and All Might panicked because what his real quirk was. The ability to copy other quirks and use them as his own, a quirk that was all too familiar to both of the heroes in the room. But unlike All Might's arch-nemesis, there seemed to be a sort of capacity to the amount of quirks that he can handle at a time, like a breaker of a circuit. It allowed him to connect a certain amount of quirks together while also not being able to go over what they assumed to either be 3 or 4 in total, not including one for all because of how differently it would interact with his body. But for now, the one ability that he had needed to have a lot of practice done. Recovery Girl had done a lot more measurements than necessary and found that there were a lot of things that enveloped his conduit quirk. The limit to his power was that he had to consciously focus on absorbing smoke in order to be able to use it, and then once it was absorbed, he only had whatever amount that was. He had the potential to reabsorb some of the ashes from moves that he would end up coming up with if they were within a short enough range. But that meant that any sort of ranged attack would drain his reserves quickly, and that would be something to work on over the PRD of 11 months, but it only drove him to try even harder than ever before. The next day at Municipal Beach Park, Izuku had a lot of time between yesterday and this moment. He had been taking his time trying to absorb different types of smoke, and all of them seemed to work. These included car exhaust, the exhaust that came from the roof of his apartment, and regular smoke from fire. Hopefully he would be able to find more sources soon. Maybe Kaken could actually help fuel him because of what his quirk resulted in. Along with this, he practiced on manipulating the smoke into a little ball of smoke which he was able to throw. He didn't have a human to practice on, so its true implications were still unknown, but he assumed that he would be able to incapacitate people via impact and asphyxiation. After that, he went to the roof of the building and tried to recreate what happened to him on the day that with the sludge villain. He had just felt like he needed to move faster and get to Katsuki as soon as possible, so that's what he did. As it turned out, it wasn't a boost that propelled him forward like Bakugo's Blast Rush Turbo, but instead it was actually a move that turned his body into ashes before flying forwards extremely quickly before reforming as himself. He could only do this move a couple of times in rapid succession before he was too dizzy to stand and became effectively useless. He made sure that on his way to the beach he replenished his smoke by absorbing car exhaust just to make sure that he had enough for whatever All Might could possibly be having him do. There was a large chance that today would be that starting point of their training for the next 11 months in order to build up for the entrance exam. A mop of green hair bounced up and down as Izuku made his way onto the outcropping on the road that overlooked the beach. allowing for himself to see all of the thrown-away metal and rubbish that people had directly dumped or that had fallen in the ocean and came back to this point. Along his sweeping gaze, he caught sight of a bony-looking man looking through piles of junk and over to the ocean. His gaze was met and All Might gestured for Izuku to come closer, and so the boy followed as what he assumed he was supposed to do before marching his way down to the sandy shores. Upon his arrival, All Might turned and stared down at the boy before speaking up. "Good morning, young Midoriya." All Might shouted from the beach as Izuku made his way over to the piles of garbage and scrapped appliances. It was here that he stopped and looked up at the hero before him. "We have a lot to do today if we plan on getting you into tip-top shape for the entrance exams." Izuku's fists clenched and he nodded before looking up at All Might, determination glistening in his eyes. "From today, I have almost exactly 10 months until the UA entrance exams. I want to make sure that I'm more than ready to take on the exam." "That's what I like to hear. That's why I've made up the Pass the Test American Dream Plan. I've taken the results of your quirk physical and built you a training program dedicated to all of the things that you would need. I've taken account for your schooling, sleep, exercise, and diet too, so you can get optimal results." His exuberant attitude almost shocked Izuku, but it made him happy that All Might was dedicating himself wholeheartedly to his new disciple. With the workout made and everything in place, the duo began their journey to reach their combined goal of getting Izuku into UA Academy. A road which was going to be long and hard, yet Izuku knew that this was exactly how he was going to make his dream a reality, and so he made sure that there wasn't a moment wasted. He had taken on the Pass the Test American Dream Plan, and he wasn't going to just stop there. Along with all of the training he did with his now personal trainer, he practiced his quirk training and studied for school so that he could ace the entrance exams. This was going to be a long and tough 10 months, but by the time it was finished there would be no one who could deny that he hadn't worked every bit as hard as all of the other applicants. 7 months after the start of training. The thing about altering a plan that's been made for your specific body and for a very specific purpose is that when you change one thing, it throws the rest way too far out of balance. There were basic requirements that had to be met and were indisputable, such as that he had to go to school over the course of the weekdays and that he would train with All Might before and after school. The only things that weren't being monitored were his sleep, study time, and his hour or so of free time each day. Izuku had taken it upon himself to use his free time and an hour of his planned sleeping time in order to train his muscles and his quirk. If this were to have only been done maybe 3 or 4 days a week, it would still be maintainable. However, that wasn't what he did. He was scheduled to wake up at 4 in the morning, and a 15-year-old like himself needed to be getting around 8 to 10 hours of sleep per night. This means that he would have to be going to sleep around 8 at night as a bare minimum, and yet he would stay up until 10 just to get this extra training. It was because of all these things that Izuku collapsed and was unable to move while doing his aerobic exercise with Small Might. It was obvious after he fell that he was overexerting and that he wasn't resting enough and that his body didn't have enough time to heal itself. "Come on, kid. My Pass the Test American Dream Plan was designed specifically with your body in mind so that you'd be ready before the date of the exam. If you're overworking yourself, then you're just going to hurt yourself. Overdoing it is no good. Don't you want to pass?" Small Might looked down at the boy with a frustrated look on his face while Midoriya crawled up onto his hands and knees. "I do. But I don't just want to pass the exam. I'm going to have to work harder than anyone else in order to make it in the exam. I want to be like you. I want to be the strongest hero." He struggled onto his feet before reaching to grab the microwave again. "So that's it, huh?" He's got his mind set on the far future. In a puff of smoke, Small Might became All Might and lifted Izuku so he was standing fine. "You blind fanboy. Such dumb zeal. But that's exactly what I like to hear." He gave a jovial laugh before releasing his hold on Izuku. "Leave it to this old man to fix your plan." And that was how it went. All Might increased the intensity of the plan, upped the caloric intake, and kept the same amount of sleep. There was an immediate improvement in Izuku's skill over the remaining 3 months, even allowing for the beach to be cleaned up an entire month before the day of the exam, something All Might didn't expect to have happened. Every day before their run, Izuku had spent an extra hour going beyond and cleaning more of the beach. Over the course of the remaining month, the duo focused on increasing the abilities of Izuku's smoke quirk. All Might was confused as to what actually happened with Midoriya's actual quirk. It was the ability to copy multiple quirks at a time, but if that were the case, we could have been able to copy All Might's quirk just by touch. This led him to believe that his body could only handle very specific quirks that were like his smoke. Over the last month, they focused on refining what Izuku already knew. The distance of his dash went from 5 meters up to 8, the amount of smoke shots he could shoot in a row went from 6-ish to 9-ish, as well as him coming up with a move that he liked to call the Cinder Blast. Essentially, it was just a smoke shot that he charged up and compressed in his hand before blasting it out in a buckshot-like cone away from his palm. This newer power used a lot of smoke, so it was a last-ditch effort to protect himself. With no time left in the month, All Might gifted Izuku with his power. His journey to UA was just getting started as he made his way to the train station. The excitement was boiling inside of him as he got closer to the school. As he arrived, he did his best to keep calm and walk into the building. Maybe there's nothing to worry about. He tripped and started falling as his thoughts continued, or maybe I'll just die here there. That's fine. As he accepted his death, all of his momentum stopped and a cute voice spoke up with a giggle. Are you okay? It's a bad omen to fall on the day of an exam. She straightened him and then touched the tips of her fingers together. Sorry for using my quirk. I just thought you'd want luck on your side. But I'll see you later. Good luck in the exam. She ran off and Izuku watched, stunned as she made her way inside of the building, likely to get to her seat before everything started. After that little meeting and then refocusing, he made his way into the examination room where he took his seat next to Bakugo as was the number assigned. It took a little bit longer than expected to get everything settled because of the sheer amount of people who had decided to take exam. It took a few hours in order to go through the entire exam, quite the process, and yet Izuku was finished with an hour to spare, leaving him enough time to revise every single question before the time was up. Once all the tests were recollected, Present Mike took center stage before shouting out to the crowd of potential students, "Welcome to today's performance. Everybody say hey." There were crickets that cried louder than the students, which didn't seem to lessen his excitement. Well, that's cool, my examinee listeners. I'm here to present the guidelines of your practical. Are you ready? The silence was even more deafening than before, and yet he was not put off in the slightest, only picking up speed as he spoke. This is how the test will go, my listeners. You'll be experiencing a 10-minute-long mock cityscape maneuvers. After this presentation, everyone will head to your assigned testing locations. The overexuberant spokesperson shouted before going on to talking about the rules as well as what the examinees may be going up against. Each site is filled with 3 kinds of faux villain. Points are awarded for defeating each kind of robot according to their respective difficulty levels. You are to use your quirks to disable these faux villains and earn points. A sudden hand shot up and a very strict man followed it. May I ask a question? Present Mike nodded. You already asked one, but go ahead. The well-dressed examinee held up the given handout before pointing to one of the pictures. There are no fewer than 4 types of faux villains on the handout we were given. Such a blatant error is extremely unbecoming for the top hero academy in all of Japan. He quickly turned and jabbed his finger in Izuku's direction. And you with the unkempt hair. You've been muttering the entire time and it's distracting. If this is just some sort of game to you, then you should just walk out right now. Izuku's head flicked downward and covered his mouth before muttering out an apology while Present Mike answered the question. Examinee 7111, thank you for calling in with your question. The 4th faux villain is actually worth 0 points, and so it is more of an obstacle that's in your way. It's like a thwomp from those old Super Mario games. Each site only has one of these obstacles. He let the crowd absorb all the information before he spoke again. Now that's all from me, young listeners. But I will leave you with a sign of good faith and good luck. The school's motto, go far and beyond. Plus ultra. All of the examinees joined in and screamed with Present Mike at the top of their lungs before everyone piled out of the room and onto their assigned buses to get to their testing site. Fortunately for Izuku, he had been assigned a different location than Bakugo. A plus in his books because he knew that he would be hunted down before the exam even started. Once everyone finally got all the way off the bus and all the formalities had been gone through, All of the potential students had began to warm up, flexing their quirks to prepare for the events ahead. Izuku was no different, surrounding his arms with smoldering ashes to lift himself from the ground momentarily and then charging one of his cinder bombs before absorbing it back into his body. Following this, he performed a couple of dashes around the opening area before doing regular stretches as the rest of the teens got ready to run in. While Midoriya was still getting prepared, an echo shook the very ground that the teens stood upon. Just one word to set off the crowd and give them a heads up over Izuku. Go! While Midoriya was still getting prepared, an echo shook the very ground that the teens stood upon. Just one word to set off the crowd and give them a heads up over Izuku. Go! The crowd of eager teens stood in shock for a few moments, barely even an instant, as a stampede started and left Izuku in the dust. Once he saw that everyone had left him, he went into a panic and his quirk kicked in to try and boost him forward. A cloud of gray smoke and golden ashes sped toward the concrete jungle that they were supposed to be fighting robots within. It only took a few seconds to catch back up to the group, and with his powers of smoke, he went straight through the group, enveloping them and confusing the vast majority of the people there. Although they wavered, Izuku stayed steadfast and jumped on the top of a three-pointer and used the exhaust to blast himself upward in a spiraling column of smoke before reverting to his human form to give everyone a smile when he was pulled back towards the mechanical being by the force of gravity. He reformed mid-air and crashed into the machine with force, toppling it completely. As the wannabe hero came off and looked at his work, an incredulous gasp left his mouth, having never seen the level of destruction that had come from his oldest quirk. What was that? I wonder if it has something to do with All Might's quirk. The words came out as a whisper as he moved on. This momentary pause had given the competition more time to make up for lost time. With only 3 points to his name, Izuku knew that it was essential that he start to rack up his own points. The location that they started at had become flooded with broken bots and busybodies that were there to reduce the mechanical beings to their most basic parts. Izuku knew that he would have to go to a side of ground gamma that was less saturated with examinees. He took a look around and saw an intake vent of one of the larger buildings. If the buildings have a proper air condition system, there has to be an outtake as well. He dashed off and was surprised that he was in a position to get into the vent because the distance from his previous position was easily twice that of he had been able to do before the exam. It was certain now, whatever All Might did had increased the abilities of his own quirk. As he launched himself from the exhaust pipe on the roof, Izuku surveyed the environment. Using his arms as a smoke-powered propulsion system, he was able to maintain his height and see everything. Potential students had flooded off to the northeastern part of the grounds while a few stragglers went directly to the north. This left Izuku with the option of going to the western part of the map, which he did with haste. Upon his arrival, the various robots that had previously been dormant from their lack of activity were now fully engaged with the single character that had dropped from the sky, directly upon a single pointer. The devastating drop had reduced the bot to bits and brought our favorite freckled boy up to 4 points. He knew that this wouldn't be enough to pass or even get remotely good marks, and yet wasn't panicking. The sheer amount of 2 and 3 pointers that were converging upon him guaranteed him acceptance, if his quirk could hold up. He knew that there was only so much he could do before he would run out of his smoke, and so he had to take out the mechs as efficiently as possible. After he had gone through a few of the automations, he realized that they left almost no smoke, and so he must conserve all he could. Often, he would bait a group into an area before blinding them with a sulfur bomb and performing a sky drop in order to take them all out at once. He had used this method continuously until he had around 30 points under his belt. This streak only stopped when an alarming uproar came from where all of the examinees had flocked to. Izuku's natural hero instincts, and he dropped all forms of fighting of the bots. His body seemed to move on its own, racing through the air in his smoke dash form. He only stopped about 4 times on his way there, his adrenaline allowing for him to stay in that form for an extended PRD of time. As he arrived, the level of pure destruction scared the boy to his very core. The fact that the school would put a monster like this into an exam with children that could only slightly use their quirks was completely ridiculous. Everyone was running from the falling buildings and the single giant machine that threatened their lives. They ran as if they were a herd of scared deer running from a predator. Izuku fought against the rushing people passing. His smoke body was sliding around and between the individuals running at him. Once he was close enough, he stared up at the borderline god before him. He watched on and was about to leave when he heard a scream from the rubble. His eyes locked onto a girl that was stuck under heavy concrete which shut down his mind. His legs moved on their own, exactly like that time 10 months with the slime quirk user. His mind fell back to the words that All Might left him with, when you use one for all, clench up your butt and let your heart cry out. Those words were important and they started with his legs. All at once, his legs exploded into plumes of smoke as Izuku was jettisoned into the sky. Scream from the bottom of your heart. A smoldering spiral of ashes rose up above the machine as his voice raised in volume and his form became physical, with the exception of his right arm which was a length of smoke from the wrist to the shoulder as he screamed at the top of his lungs, smash. Izuku's fist was lit up with red and golden streaks upon his skin before his hand was driven into the mechanized sheet of metal and the cloud of smoke followed like a missile raining down upon the giant machine, hitting numerous parts across the android's body. Its legs, arms, core and head were sent with clouds of heavy smoke ball before they exploded on where they landed. This reduced the once crumpled bot down into a plethora of scrap parts that flew away from all of the would-be students. His legs still hadn't changed back. It took a ridiculous amount of his storage and strength to get him fins high up, and it would be a miracle if he could come out of this without any broken bones. Besides the issue with his legs, smoke or not, gravity was still in effect and as such dragged the teen down to the ground below. A sudden panic filled his thoughts as he rapidly approached the ground. He knew that he could perform a dash in order to negate the majority of the momentum, but if done too early or too late there would be dire consequences. The girl that he had been saving before was now free and levitating upwards in her last-ditch effort to try and save Izuku from his impending death. Izuku noticed and tried to use his arm thrusters in order to make it easier to help, but after he started and was launched off course, he realized that his other arm was also just a length of smoke which was reason for the propulsion error. Now that he was sailing away from the floating girl, he had to go with his first idea and dash to try and cancel his momentum. He took his time, focused on the distance between himself and the ground. Not yet, not yet, not yet. His thoughts echoed within his mind and his eyes shot open wide as he shouted, now. His voice reached the ears of the examinees and they all silently wished for whatever his plan was to be a success. Izuku was a whole different ordeal. His quirk wouldn't activate. That final slam into the zero-pointer had used up the last of his reserves and he wasn't in a position to replenish his smoke because the distance was much too great. The only thing that happened was a slight change in skin tone as his skin tried to convert to smoke. His fall continued, and just before impact, he braced himself instinctively. It never came. At least not in the same way that one would expect. He felt his body disperse and an omnipotent-like feeling filled his very being. An energy seemed to waft around him. There was a fleeting tick in time before every single guy and girl in the vicinity gathered at the floating cinders before they all assimilated into the weakened form of our freckle-faced favorite who was now on the ground. His color was pale and his muscles weak. He focused and regained his bearings before walking to the smoldering zero-pointer and laying at its broken form, absorbing all of the smoke that had come from it and all of the smoke that was still emanating from it until he had fully restored his body to its prior state. After the exams had concluded, Izuku was taken to one of the patient beds within Recovery Girl's office. He was taken care of by the older hero and had increased the speed of his recovery. This was until he woke up in the bed and had a brief panic attack before the medic hero questioned him, "Well, what? Little Sonny here has finally woken up. I've done a full checkup on you and compared it to your old scan that we did when All Might first brought you in. Your body was all right. No injuries unless you count a minor case of exhaustion. I think that you were lucky to have had some smoke, otherwise you would likely have had much more severe injuries. You had quite the fall when you came down from that punch." She paused and plopped herself up on her chair before making it swivel to face Izuku. "I'm rather impressed that your body was able to handle the backlash. It is no doubt in part due to your quirk. Because your quirk allows your body to be converted into smoke, I believe that your body released the damage in the form of expelling excess smoke." She explained to him the more scientific way that his body expelled the excess damage which flowed in one ear and out the other, his body still too tired to focus on the explanation. After a couple more drawn-out explanations and about 30 minutes, the elderly woman allowed the boy to walk off without any bandages or casts as he just didn't need them. He walked out slowly and took a breath of fresh air as he made his way to the train station as well as onto the train, making his way home for a night of well and truly deserved rest. A week. An entire week had passed since the time of exam and Izuku was stressed out about the results. He knew for a fact that he had passed the written exam. Those sleepless nights he had stayed up for an extra couple hours of study time had paid off, and that was something he was absolutely certain of. The physical, however, was where Izuku's confidence had taken a nosedive straight to the ground. He had a late start which he thought that he recovered from. But after he departed from the group, he had no way of knowing just how many points the rest of the prospects had. 20 villain points couldn't possibly have been enough. 9 one-pointers, 1 two-pointers and 3 three-pointers. 31 points. There wasn't a chance that he could match up to those who were more battle-oriented like Kaken. His quirk was more for humans and incapacitating them with ease. The week post the exams had been one full of training and stress. Izuku did not have much to do, and so he did what he had been doing for the past 2 months. He worked out his body and quirk. Dagoba Beach had already began receiving more trash and garbage, and so Izuku felt personally responsible for keeping it clean. Something he did absolutely spectacularly, just for the record. This week had concluded with a letter in the mail. One that had been personally delivered to the house and given to his darling mother Inko. She quickly gave it to Izuku before he took it calmly into his room. The suspense had been killing him, and so he took it upon himself to tear open the parcel to release the hologram projector, which in turn self-activated. This is a projection. The All Might projection grinned wildly and with a level of pride that Izuku had never seen adorn his face before. I am in town for only one reason. I've come to teach it you. Izuku recoiled. Surprised with this announcement, however, it made a few pieces fall into place. As you may have been thinking upon, even if you pass the written portion, getting a mere 20 points naturally results in an extremely lackluster performance. Izuku's head fell and a couple of tears welled in his eyes while thoughts of doubt filled his mind. I knew it. I knew what I did wasn't going to be enough. His thoughts, however, were interrupted when All Might's booming voice echoed into his head. But that's not the end of the story. Let me entertain you. Please guide your attention over to the screen. A young woman's visage filled the screen and she rushed up to present Mike with an urgent matter to attend to. Do you know that curly-haired boy with freckles? The one with that crazy smoke quirk? He looks kinda plain too, if that helps. Over the course of speaking, she gestured to her hair as if it were curly and then to where the freckles were positioned on his face. Can you give him some of my points? I know that he had to have gotten more than just a few points with a quirk like that, but he could have gotten so many more if he didn't go out of his way to come and save me. Izuku's face faltered before he spoke out loud. She had to have needed those points. The video had kept going and All Might picked up when she had stopped. You've acquired your quirk and moved others with your actions. He crossed his arms and smiled wide. This exam, you see. We weren't just watching for villain-based points. His arms went from across and then up in a massive Y pose for victory as he continued on with his spiel. A hero course that rejects those who do the right thing is no hero course at all. Rescue points were also a factor in these exams. Another fundamental way of gaining points. You have been awarded 60 rescue points for your heroic actions. His hand came forward in an upside-down grasping motion. And while we're at it, 45 rescue points for Ochako Uraraka. He took a pause to make it even more dramatic. With 80 points in total, you've taken first place by 3 solid points. This will be your hero academia. His mother freaked out and was completely over the top excited that night, crying a fountain of tears that completely covered the floor of their apartment building. At some point in the night, a text was received by Izuku telling him to meet All Might at the beach that they had been doing their training at. He let his mother settle herself before slipping through the door to go off to the beach. The trek took no less than 15 minutes and he saw Small Might standing at the outlook just staring off at the ocean, admiring the work that Izuku had done to bring this speech to perfection. As he came up, Small Might turned to face him and smiled before speaking, "Congrats on passing." His hand was held up and his face stayed in the same neutral face as normal before his hand came down and he patted the top of his head. "All Might!" Izuku shouted with excitement as tears threatened to streak down his face. This outcry caused some passers-by to excitedly look onto their location, causing Small Might to panic and whisper to Izuku in a hushed shout, "Quickly! Tell them it was just a mistake." Izuku complied and rubbed the back of his head as he shouted back to the civilians, "Sorry. It was just my eyes playing tricks on me." Our young hero turned his gaze back to All Might's weakened form before he spoke. "So you're a teacher at UA now, huh? That's why we're meeting here and why you couldn't talk to me over the past week. To be honest, I was a little worried that I had failed you." Izuku's head dropped in a SBMSV sort of way before Small Might pick up after him, "Spot on, kid. At least about the whole school thing and the reason why I couldn't talk to you." The look of pride on his face had not faltered even a single time over the PRD of their conversation, "But never think that you can fail me. So long as you keep trying your hardest and put in your best work, I could never possibly be disappointed in someone who tries so hard in order to become a hero. Especially one who is so willing to give up everything in order to save even a single person. In my eyes, there is nobody who embodies the term hero more than you do." There was no stopping it. Those Deku Midoriya tears had returned because of the emotion-evoking speech that his hero just gave him. At the same time, Toshinori sighed before returning to his speech, "You're very lucky to have a quirk that deals with the backlash of using one for all. Based on the video footage, your legs and punching arm weren't able to reform themselves after some time had passed. Even then, you were barely function until you absorbed the smoke of the 0-point robot. Without that quirk, your body would have been in far worse condition." After a pause for breath, he once again returned to explaining what his take on the event was, "Don't let this get you down. If someone were to just suddenly grow a tail, they would have no idea how to use it or what its limitations were. It's the same concept with your own quirk except, I think that your quirk helps you deal with the abilities that it copies. When you first started training with your smoke, you had no idea how to use it. You even had that gap between when you obtained it and when you first absorbed smoke for the first time. I'm sure that if you train and work on it, you will even be able to do this." Small Might picked up some discarded paint cans before he became All Might and crushed them into aluminum discs. Like passing the Olympic torch, the flame will burn weakly at first, but it grows as it passes the trials ahead fan its growth. The earlier stragglers had caught eye of All Might and shouted at him, "So he is here. Let me get an autograph." Clenching his jaw and beginning to run away from the people moving in, still speaking with Izuku. "Just because you're still learning, does not mean that you are a failure. It just means that there is a little way to go before you reach your goal of becoming a hero." A thunderous shout to the heavens seemed to lock in Izuku's fate as they part ways, leaving the hero to prepare for tomorrow. It was the end of something old and the beginning of something new. A life of sadness and grief had just become a thing of the past. Enter Izuku Midoriya, the Conduit Paragon. Just because you're still learning, does not mean that you are a failure. It just means that there is a little way to go before you reach your goal of becoming a hero. A thunderous shout to the heavens seemed to lock in Izuku's fate as they part ways, leaving the hero to prepare for tomorrow. It was the end of something old and the beginning of something new. A life of sadness and grief had just become a thing of the past. Enter Izuku Midoriya, the Conduit Paragon. "Izuku, have you got your pocket tissues?" Quiet was heard from the boy being questioned. "And your handkerchief? Have you got that?" The emotional mother began to tear up as her son stood at the door, ready to run out for his first day at Japan's most well-known heroics academy. The older woman caught her son with one more thing before he left, "Izuku, you look great." Her timid behavior left Izuku with a smile as he took his first step out the door. "Thanks, Mom. See you later." He spoke quickly as he rushed out the door and onward to his new place of schooling. The amazing adventure that was the train ride dropped Izuku off near the gates of the school and he trekked his way through the building, getting lost momentarily before finding a gigantic door with the number 1 at the top and a giant letter A sitting beneath it. Thoughts flooded his mind as he went to peek through the door. It'll be just the elites from that group of examinees. He opened the door slowly and looked just past the door. I hope those scary guys are in another class. Izuku took one massive step inside and internally screamed as he realized both the people he thought about were arguing quite loudly. The strict-looking one had begun to introduce himself. I'm from Semi-Private Academy. My name is Tenya Ida. His polite and yet somehow incredibly mechanical introduction was thrown straight to the wind as the blonde-haired teen mocked him in return. A stuck-up elitist, huh? I should blow you to bits. His arrogant way of talking struck Ida, and he went to rebut the explosive blonde before he noticed the newest addition to the room and robotically made his way up to the new attendee. Hello. I'm from Sam Dash. His spiel was quickly interrupted as Izuku explained that he had already had and told who he was. And my name is Izuku. I'm from Aldra Junior High. It's nice to meet you. His timid nature confused the taller boy, but he continued on with his original line of thought. Midoriya, you perceived the true nature of that practical exam. While I did not. I misjudged you. I hate to admit it, but you were the superior candidate. His hands gestured sporadically toward our moss-haired protagonist. Before our smoke-powered conduit could respond, the bubbly girl he had met just before the exams and the very same one that tried to save his life came through the door and recognized him purely based on the wild mass atop his head. Hey, I know that curly, unkempt hair. You're that plain-looking boy that saved me in the entrance exam. Izuku's confidence had definitely begun to increase after he got his quirk. His training with All Might, his personal quirk training as well as his overwhelming score results in the entrance exam was definitely what kept him at the top of his game. It was because of these boosts that he was actually able to respond to the girl instead of just responding in his head. Thanks. I'm happy that you were accepted as well. Well, maybe not a completely stuttering mess. The girl who recently identified herself as Ochako continued on with her gushing. This of course was interrupted when something laying on the ground caused her face to go pale because of its yellow, caterpillar-like body. If you're here to socialize, then get out. The caterpillar snuck up on the two in the doorway with a juice box in his mouth. This is the hero course. You all should be exemplary students. It only took a few moments for Izuku and the rest of their class to settle into their seats as well as focus in on their new teacher. The man in the orange sleeping bag pulled out a uniform and threw it in front of himself along with a bag that was filled with more. Change quickly and head down to the training grounds. With that, he left the students to sort themselves as he went down to the training field. It took the students no less than 5 minutes to change and find the field that they were to meet at. Izuku was the first to arrive and stood up straight. A slight sweat came off of him as began muttering. After Ochako came over and poked him in the ribs, "Could you stop? You're kind of freaking everyone out." Izuku immediately stopped and looked around before his face lit up a bright red hue. Sorry." He responded in an instant and stopped muttering just as their teacher Aizawa Shota began to speak. UA is known for its freestyle educational system. That also applies to us teachers as well. This is the reason that we won't be going to the introduction ceremony. Aizawa took a pause for breath before continuing. This country still insists on prohibiting quirks when calculating the averages of those records. It's not rational. The Department of Education is just procrastinating. And so we're going to be performing a quirk aptitude. Izuku, you're up first. How far could you throw in middle school? Izuku gulped and stepped forward before speaking. I think my farthest was about 49 meters. Aizawa almost started before Izuku finished and said, Great, now try it with your quirk. Do whatever you need to. Just don't leave the circle. Izuku walked forward and into the circle before he picked up the ball. He tossed the ball up and down to measure the weight in his hand before he put his hand back. There was a risk involved in the next move he was going to do. He had used his Cinder Blast before but never on an object, and he was yet to use this technique with One for All. The level of risk was there, but it would be necessary if he wanted to do well. He reeled back and threw his arm forward as fast as possible, his body pivoting, and in the final moment he activated his One for All powered Cinder Blast. It was something that looked more like Katsuki's explosions than Bakugo's. The force alone was incredibly powerful, but it was the following shockwave that solidified that fact in all of the students' minds as they stumbled back in shock as well as let out a collective awe. With the exception of Bakugo. He was absolutely furious. No, he was downright livid. How in the hell had Deku been able to do something like that? In the eyes of Bakugo, Izuku had not only lied to him for years and looked down on him, but he had the audacity to do all that and steal his quirk. What was the point of being able to make sheet explode if Deku could do it and more? Not too bad, Midoriya. 964.3 meters. Aizawa turned his tablet to the students and spoke up while the students stared at the score. It is important for us to know our limits inside and out. That's the rational first step in figuring out the kind of heroes you'll be and what ways you'll be able to strengthen your quirk. The class suddenly burst out with excitement as the prospect of using their quirks for school filled their mind, all of them excited to show off and outdo all of the other students. We get to use our quirks. That's awesome. Mina's voice still echoed and resounded as her fist was pumped up in the air. This sparked an eruption of excited children speaking about their quirks and arguing that they're better than others. The screaming went on for another couple minutes before their dark-haired teacher's face became shadowed and he let out a quick maniacal chirp of laughter which silenced his students and refocused their attention on the now darkened man before them. His laughter died just as quickly as it had began, which only sent shivers down the students as he began speaking. You all think this is just some stupid, silly game, don't you? You're hoping to become heroes after 3 years here. If you think that it will be nothing but fun and games, you're dead wrong. If that's what you're thinking, then you should just walk out right now. Don't waste my time and yours if you're not going to give your all and dedicate the next 3 years to being a perfect hero. His speech shook the majority of students to their core, scaring them and giving them all second thoughts to their profession. But Aizawa was unfinished when he left them to their own thoughts. In this quirk aptitude test, you will show me how effective your quirk is and how you know how to utilize it. The one who scores the lowest will be deemed as hopeless and will officially be expelled from Yui Academy and will not return. Your fate at this school will be determined explicitly by your ability in this test. You are the emissary of your fate. The prospective students blanched as their teacher walked away to begin the first section of their test. Event number 1. The 50-meter dash was one that had the most noticeable differences. The ways that the students used their quirks to move themselves at incredible distances was a major factor that Aizawa memorized in very fine detail. It was something that would be brought back up in very fine detail for the students that would remain in this education system. There was much difference in the students: a girl who lightened her clothing by negating gravity, an aggressive young man that propelled himself forward using explosions from his palms like a rocket blasting from the surface of the earth. There were those that couldn't use their quirks to increase in speed like the invisible girl or the creation quirk user. She would likely have to be one that relied mostly on her body's own physical strength. A boy with the mop of green hair had utterly confused his fellow students as he flexed each of his muscles at the starting line. His leg contracted and coiled like a spring. If one were to look closely at the teenager's legs, they would be greeted with the sight of multiple pulsing lines across his lower appendages, each of which flickered as though they were a kindled flame only beginning to grow. In the instant that the buzzer went off, Izuku's legs extended to the full length and he sailed a meter before his entire body evaporated into an ashen double helix as he flew across the 50-meter stretch. His gaseous body floated at the finish line for a moment before swirling and into a little smoke whirlwind that condensed into his lean and well-built frame. He was dizzy and just about vomited on the field while he blushed and stumbled back to the group. His freckles were almost hidden by the red tint of his face. 3.43 seconds. The machine beeped out in the same excited and mechanical tone that it had used for all the students before him, and it was the same that all the other students would hear once someone finishes their own runs. Following the mechanized outcry, the students that had already finished their dash sprinted up to him in a flock of blurred speed. What was that? You were like whoosh and then you landed like B. The pink-skinned acid user was the first to speak before he had reoriented himself. Everything was happening at once, and the motion-sick child became overwhelmed from all the questions and outcries about his quirk. There was much commotion and the questioning didn't stop until Ida approached. The brunette boy spoke in an even more robotic tone than that of the action machine from before. You were incredible out there. I would like to congratulate you for moving so quickly. You were even able to nearly match my own speed. I'll make sure to train harder so you won't outdo me with what my quirk is actually supposed to do. His excitement was matched only by his wildly flailing arms. Izuku smiled and stood up to stand on equal footing with the slightly taller boy before he pushed his arm out. Now let's make sure to stay here and help each other grow. I'm sure that we can become great heroes. Izuku's timid nature was partially hidden at the mention of heroes, and so the students rallied behind his passionate outcry, each of them touched by the meaning that echoed from his heart. Following this, the crowd had dispersed slightly before the next event had begun and thereafter came back outside just before the exam had completed. Moving along, here are the results of your test. Aizawa pulls out a small remote and clicks the center button before displaying the results of the exam. As I said before, you all took the apprehension test. One of you will be expelled. The results ladder appeared on the wall where Momo sat at the top and a weird-haired boy was at the bottom of the list. Mineta, you have placed on the lowest rung of the test. If you can prove yourself, the general education may allow you to join them. But it is unlikely you will be allowed back into the hero course without some major improvements to both your physical abilities and some though in ways that you use your quirk. Aizawa's blank stare bore into Mineta's head as he panicked and face sank into an unnatural darkness. All the surrounding students felt a pang of guilt and tried to cheer him up. This, however, was unable to change anything and made him feel worse. This was until Izuku nervously approached and clenched his jaw before he spoke. Mineta, there are a lot of things that make a hero. You probably don't want to hear this from me, but you don't need a flashy quirk to become a hero. Think of, he has a hair quirk like you too, but it's the way that he applies himself. I'm sure that if you try your hardest, you can become an amazing hero too. You've just come to your first hurdle, and I know that if you train and work hard, nothing will stop you from achieving your goal. The entire class had gone silent as Midoriya spoke it. Level of respect at which his fellow students already held for him kept them silent. The much smaller bubble-headed teen also understood this and surprisingly listened intently while tears welled in his eyes. It was likely that he didn't have pep talks like these, so it meant a lot to the adolescent. After everything was settled, the students went back to their class and Mineta was sent to either swap courses or fully leave at the administration office. After returning to the classroom, the kids learned where they would be taught how to become heroes. This was followed by going back home. Or it would have been had Izuku not been stopped by the bubbly gravity girl on the way to the train station. Hey Deku! Wait up! The green-haired smokestack stopped and turned before smiling as she entered his line of sight. Hey Ochako, are you headed home too? The young lady nods before she walks alongside our protagonist. Now with each other, they set off to the nearby train station and sat there as the trains came and went. The quirk apprehension test was pretty intense, huh? There were a lot of times where I thought IW wasn't going to be able to pass. He stuttered as he spoke, which only further increased the blush that filled his cheeks. Ochako, on the other hand, was more outgoing and not at all nervous talking to the frightful boy before her. Yeah, it really SCKS that Mineta actually had to leave. Hopefully he'll take your words to heart and do his best to become a hero. She kicked her legs out and groaned as her train came. I'll see you tomorrow, Deku. She jumped from the station and onto the high-speed mode of transportation that whisked her off to her apartment. Little Izuku was left alone at the station to contemplate what he was going to be doing for the coming years. He laid out his syllabus and was happy with what he needed to do, and so he laid peacefully to sleep so he could be ready for whatever shenanigans awaited him the next day at school. Mineta, you have placed on the lowest rung of the test. If you can prove yourself, the general education may allow you to join them. But it is unlikely you will be allowed back into the hero course without some major improvements to both your physical abilities and some though in ways that you use your quirk. Mineta, there are a lot of things that make a hero. You probably don't want to hear this from me, but you don't need a flashy quirk to become a hero. The second day at UA was more of a normal day. Izuku was quick to get through the gates and then up to homeroom where the day was mostly normal. All the same basic classes as in junior high. After all, This was a school and it would be ridiculous to have stupid heroes that couldn't graduate basic high school. The heroes in training went through all the same basic lessons such as English with present mic, maths with ectoplasm, and art with midnight. But it was the afternoon where the students would prove themselves. Basic hero training was the course that everyone was looking forward to the most. It would be impossible not to when the #1 hero was going to be your teacher and show you the ropes of how to be a real hero. Our favorite Greenette practically shook in his chair as he waited for his favorite hero to come in. It would be the first time he had seen him since receiving his entrance letter from the school, and he would finally be able to show what he had been learning in their time apart from each other. Izuku didn't ignore the conversations of the people around him, the combined excitement of 19 other students that adored the pro hero. The chatter was immediately silenced as the classroom door slammed open and a mammoth of a man came out of it, chest puffed out and leaning on the doorframe while standing on his toes. "I have come through the door like a normal person." Quiet whispers echoed in the room as everyone wondered about his Silver Age costume, and the excitement from before he entered the room had returned tenfold with the muscular behemoth charging to the center of the room. "There is no time to dally, my appealing students. For today, we are beginning our hero training. Today's activity will be battle training, and for that you will need these." The legendary hero pulled out a small remote out of seemingly nothing before clicking a small button that made 4 columns slide out of the wall, each of them numbered from 1 to 19 with 1 slot to spare. Likely intended for the student that had been removed from the program the day before. In accordance with the quirk registry and the forms that you submitted before being admitted. These are your costumes. Be quick to change and meet me at Training Ground Beta. The 8th user of One for All stalked out of the room quickly before making his way to the training grounds, leaving his students to get ready. The class rushed through the tunnel and was quick to come out the other side. Ida wore his full suit of armor, Ochako stood out in her pink and black body-tight suit and out came Izuku as the very last. He had spent months on ideas for a hero costume that he would inevitably be wearing. Something strong but light and something that would be able to transform with him when he transformed into smoke. Metal armors like Ida's would be completely out of the question, but synthetics like leather or Kevlar were perfect. Stabbing damage would be relatively useless, but blast damage and blunt damage would take their toll. Izuku didn't want to be constantly destroying his costume because of the powerful blasts of One for All that he would put out, so he opted for a navy blue dyed vest with a dark hoodie under it, sleeves rolled and pinned to the elbows. From the waist down, he wore dark cargo shorts and a Kevlar version of the same shoes he normally wore, even dyed in the same color to keep the aesthetic. When he ran out from the tunnel, he was quickly greeted by a mostly shirtless Ijiro, manly costume, Midoriya. He quickly reached out to fist bump the shy boy in front of him, which was returned in a surprisingly timid manner for someone who was so strong. "Thanks, Kirishima. Your costume is pretty cool too." He was quick to admire everyone's costumes, which matched most of their personalities pretty well. But the hero to be quickly gravitated toward the friends he had already made and started chatting with the speedster and gravity girl. The brunette was quick to compliment his costume. "Deku? Cool costume. It looks really normal looking." Izuku looked a little downcast. That's what he was going for, but it didn't make the outfit less practical. "Thank you. Your costume looked great." "It's not quite what I was going for. I should have been a little more specific with what I wanted. I meant to just have it tight on the pressure points so I don't get so sick." She was a little embarrassed to be in a costume that exposed her body so much, but it was definitely something that she was going to have to get used to. They say that the clothes make the pros, and you are the proof. All Might drew the attention back to himself as he continued teaching his class. Today we will be moving on to Step 2. Statistically speaking, most battles with villain battles are most commonly seen outside. However, the most dastardly villains are likely to appear indoors. That is why you will take part in indoor anti-personnel battle training. It was a long-winded speech, but still wasn't done explaining today's exercise. After giving the students a moment, he continued his spiel. "I will be splitting you into villain and hero teams, and then you will be facing off in 2-on-2 indoor battles." The students went into a frenzy as important questions were asked. Are we gonna get expelled if we lose? Can I just blast everyone out of existence? How will we divide ourselves into teams? And last was, what determines victory? Nervously, the top hero pulled out a note card with the exercise's instructions before he began instructing the students on how the lesson would be done. Come now. My quirk isn't super hearing. Now listen up. The villain team will be set up inside the building with a nuclear weapon while the heroes have to go in and take care of it. The heroes have a limited amount of time in order to locate and capture the weapon. The heroes win when they capture the villains or secure the weapon, while the villains will win if they capture the heroes or fend off the heroes until the time is up. From behind his back and from seemingly out of nowhere, All Might pulled out a large box with the word "Flutz" in bold letters. It was here that the more robotic student waved his arms. Is that really the best way to make teams? It was here that Midoriya cut in to try and explain. It makes sense. Pros often have to team up with heroes from other agencies in a crisis situation. This way, we simulate that environment. Ida was quick to nod and apologize for his interruption before All Might started drawing out all the lots and splitting the students into their teams. Teams are same as canon. Seeing as there was a student moved into the general education course yesterday, someone will have to have a second go around after they've completed their battle. A winner from the first team will team up with Miss Yaoyorozu. Momo looked around at the rest of her class, trying to come up with strategies for each of them, but there was no point, so she waited to see who would be competing first. Izuku, on the other hand, was nervous about his team up with the bubbly brunette. Excited, but a bit overwhelmed with such a cute girl to work with. Let's get started. First up is going to be. He pulled his arms from the boxes and then crossed them. The heroes are Team A and the villains are Team D. The villain team goes in first. You'll have 5 minutes to set up before the heroes are sent in. This is training exercise and won't take full effect unless you adopt the villain mindset and go all out. Don't hold back. I'll step in if things go too far. Standing outside the building, awaiting the alarm to go for them to go in, Izuku took a few deep breaths as he worked on a strategy to try and beat his lifelong bully. Hey Deku, Bakugo was the one that bullied you, right? Are you sure you can do this? His partner was concerned. This was going to be a big moment for them. It would be the first time that he had really gone head-to-head against Kaken as equals and not some quirkless Deku. He would stand on equal ground with him and everyone else here. It's okay, Uraraka. It's time for me to take him on. This fight has been a long time coming and I plan on showing him that I really can be a hero. A fire seemed to be lit in Izuku's bright green eyes. His arms began pulsing and becoming a hazy gray all the way to his forearms. Kindled orange ashes flicked off of his arms. I'm going to win. Indoor anti-personnel battle training, begin. All Might gave them the go-ahead and held a notepad as he started preparing to grade his students. I promise, young Midoriya, I will grade you the same as everyone else. All right, Uraraka. Going inside the front door is going to be way too obvious. Can you make yourself weightless? I'll boost you up a couple floors and then I'll follow after you. The young woman nodded and quickly removed the weight from her clothes and body before Izuku boosted her up, and smoke dashed straight up into the air and onto the ledge of the 3rd floor. He was quick to turn around and pull the gravity girl toward the ledge and let her release her quirk before entering through the window. Successful infiltration. There are a lot of blind corners, so be careful and watch what you're doing no matter what. Knowing Kaken, he left Ida and is going to hunt us down. It was only a moment after the explanation that a loud explosion echoed through the hallway. Come on, Deku. Come out and fight me like a man. You've been lying to me for years, so get your butt out here and fight me like a real man. A subtle crackling sound followed the voice, and the stomping of his feet got closer with each passing moment. Alright, Uraraka, there's no way that I'm going to be able to stay away from him. He'll hunt me down until the end of the exercise. I want you to try and find the bomb and then tell me where it is once you've found it. I'll try to subdue Kaken and give you some time before meeting back up with you. Izuku started walking toward where Bakugo's voice had come from. The sparks had stopped, the shouting was no longer there, and the footsteps were gone. Izuku had walked to the end of the corridor and was quickly attacked when Bakugo came flying around one of the corners before swinging his arm down and letting off an explosion directly at Izuku. Deku, show me what you can do. Smoke filled the hallway and Izuku stepped back, looking up at the explosive teen before lifting his arms up in front of his face. You want me to see what I can do now? I guess I'll show you. All the smoke that had filled the hall began flooding toward the green-haired hero-to-be and was absorbed into his arms and body, recharging his smoke powers and stacking away enough smoke for a cinder bomb. This is going to be perfect for me. Your quirk is the worst match for mine because it feeds it. Bakugo grunted and then rushed with his right arm drawn back in a wide hook position. Counter or not, I'm still going to kick your butt. With that said, he threw a heavy right hook to the left side of Izuku's face. To his surprise, Izuku moved into it and was quick to grab the arm and swing around with the momentum before driving Kaken over his shoulder and slamming his body into the concrete floor with a loud and powerful scream. Kaken, you always start with a heavy right hook. I've seen enough to know because I've been studying you and every hero I could think of. It's all in the notebook of mine. The one that you blew up and threw out the window. I'm done being your useless punching bag. Bakugo barely gave him enough time to finish as he used his explosions to launch himself to his feet and push an explosion at Izuku, making him stumble back and then use his smoke dash to make some distance between the two of them. Thinking on his feet and trying to do a little damage, Izuku lifted his arms and blasted dense ball of smoke into Bakugo's chest, keeping him at range. The only close-range attack he had would do a lot of damage, and controlling one for all was still difficult. Bakugo was quick to block the smoke blasts with explosions of his own, only being hit by the ones that blended in with the smoke from his own explosions. They did little to damage him, but there would surely be a few bruises the next day, but the adrenaline of in the moment masked the pain. Frustrated with being hit and not dealing any damage, Bakugo rushed in, dodging every pot shot Izuku threw at him before moving his hand in a palm strike into Izuku's chest and causing an explosion which launched him through one of the large walls and into a nearby room. Izuku struggled to get up and soon reached out to the settling smoke, pulling it toward himself and regaining his health. Is that all you got, Kaken? Almost teasingly, Izuku's voice dripped sarcasm as he started to overcome his fear of his childhood bully. There was no more holding him on a pedestal and letting himself be walked over. From here on out, he would defend himself and stand up against his oppressor. I've looked up to you. I've always looked at you like you were a hero. The ultimate goal and what I wanted to be. That's why I made this. They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so tell me if you're flattered. Following his words, Izuku charged his arm with the power of one for all and threw his punch toward Bakugo. At the peak, when the shockwave exploded from his fist, Izuku let out an equally powerful cinder blast, practically recreating the explosions that Kaken would make on a daily basis. The powerful explosion set Bakugo into an adjacent wall, knocking the wind out of him. It took a moment to regain himself, but when done, he was absolutely furious. He, the strong, borderline legendary Katsuki Bakugo, was being utterly shown up by quirkless Izuku. How dare he be shown up by the useless little pebble? It was here that a quiet ding came from his wrists. The grenade gauntlets had fully charged. So you're mocking me, huh? You've been laughing behind my back all this time. You know how my quirk works. Since you're such a stalker and all. Assuming they did what I asked, this little toy has been storing the fluid that I sweat for one monster blast. It was here that the #1 hero decided to let himself be known. Young Bakugo, stop that right now. Are you trying to kill him? He was genuinely concerned. All Might knew personally how much damage Izuku could take, but if this explosion was exponentially stronger than just the base-level explosions that Bakugo could create on his own, then the monster explosion he was talking about would be on a whole new level. Bakugo brought up his hands and grabbed onto the pin, tugging on it as he gave his response. He won't die if he dodges. With his back to the wall and a world-class explosion being aimed at him, Izuku did all he could and just began absorbing everything he could, all the smoke that could possibly pull as the pin was pulled. Time seemed to slow down and the smoke rushed his body and filled him, but that didn't stop the concussive force that came with the bomb going off. Where is Midoriya? The voice was formal but carried worry as the rest of the students began to panic. Did Bakugo explode him so hard that he turned to ash? This worry came from Kaminari, a question that every student was thinking. Did Bakugo just kill Midoriya? Ribbit? The frog-quirked girl asked with genuine concern. The potential and gruesome truth was out. It was only the second day and it seemed certain that the greenette was dead. All Might stared at the screen, begging for Izuku to come out from some of the rubble or from around a corner using his smoke dash. All Might was just about to turn and run off to the battleground when Kirishima pointed up to the screen. Hey All Might, what's going on with that smoke? Back at Ground Zero, a golden swirl of ashes rose from the ground and then exploded outward, forcing Bakugo back out from the first wall that they broke. It was here that Izuku stood tall, his clothing smoldered and looked burnt as he looked around, taking in all the damage and realizing what must have just happened to him. Kaken, I think you are very lucky. If that was someone else, they may not have gotten out of that alive. There was a collective sigh back in the control room. All of the students had began understanding just how strong Izuku's quirk was. But they could all see it. He must have been incredibly tired, most of his smoke reserves were used, and he might not have been able to reform so quickly if it weren't for him actively absorbing the smoke that was created from the attack. I guess it's my turn. I don't have much left, so this is going to have to be me going all out. You'll finally get what you wanted. Izuku was about to prepare for a large-scale attack when a feminine voice played through his ear. Deku, I found the bomb. Ida is up here guarding it and I don't think I can get it without your help. It's on the 8th floor toward the north. Alright, I'll be up there as soon as I can. I'll finish this as quick as I can. With that, Izuku began focusing his single cinder missile into his arm, pulling it back like a punch to prepare for the backlash of the special move. That's more like it, Deku. Show me what you can do. Bakugo began preparing his own attack, running toward Izuku with both hands at his hips to do a double palm strike and release an explosion with it. It was for naught as Izuku threw his fist forward and shouted, "Special move! Cinder missile!" Out of his arm shot a huge orange and black helix bomb which crashed into Bakugo's chest and then exploded violently, sending the blonde through the hole he made and into a concrete wall, knocking him out. But Izuku was quick to take advantage as Bakugo was regaining consciousness. He dashed across the open area, capture tape in hand, and had the explosive teen wrapped before changing back into his normal form. Maybe the result will be different if we're to fight in a more head-to-head battle. Just us, no environment to bounce around. But I've got to go and help my teammate. With that, Izuku ran off up to the floor. Uraraka told him the bomb was on. And just like that, young Bakugo has been captured. How will Ida stand against the odds? Back with Uraraka, she listened as Ida heard that Bakugo had been captured. So it seems that my partner in crime has been defeated. No matter. I shall prevail as I am the ultimate evil. This little outburst had caused the brunette to laugh and give away her position. So you've come, Uraraka? I knew you would come, and since your quirk allows you to levitate what you touch, I've removed all objects on this floor. Your little tricks won't work here. I've been found out. Ida removed everything and now I can't use my quirk on anything here. She whispered the last little bit and stared Ida down while a static voice. Just try to distract him and tire him out. I think we have about 5 minutes, so we're going to have to work quickly. I'm going to come in through the main door, so try and get his back to the wall. Tell me when he's there. Izuku had made his way up 5 flights of stairs and walked up to the door, listening carefully as Uraraka began to lunge at Ida, to which he quickly grabbed the weapon and ran around the room, his back to the door while facing the gravity girl. Deku. He's in position. It came out as a whisper and she watched as smoke filtered in from under the door, almost completely silent. Izuku was quick to use this as an advantage and dash behind him. He was low on his smoke, so he made his move on foot, the sound letting Ida know that he was there, to which he rushed forward and moved the weapon away. So the backup has arrived. You will fail to capture my weapon. Ida was full prepared to run for the rest of the exercise. Come on, Uraraka. We can get him. Izuku was quick to rush forward again and move to the side, giving Ida an obvious path out before quickly turning and shooting out a small ball of smoke that smoldered on the floor for a moment, directly in Ida's path. Unfortunately for the speed villain, the condensed ball of smoke exploded outward and captured Ida in a sphere of smoke. Now Uraraka. Get the weapon. There was no hesitation when she sprinted the small distance and the smoke started to die down, jumping with her quirk activated on herself and capturing the weapon and ending the exercise. And that's a wrap. Congratulations on your victory, heroes. You've done well. Gather Bakugo and come back to the observation room so we can discuss the exercise. Izuku grunted and the trio left the bomb where it was. Sorry about that, Ida. That's one of my special moves and I was low on smoke. It was my last option. You and Bakugo really had us on the ropes there. If it wasn't for you walking on top of the sulfur bomb, I don't think we would have made it. Izuku rambled on while the other two laughed and walked back down to unwrap Bakugo before returning to the observation room. Here we go, all finished for now. I'll try to write a lot more than I have been. I'm sorry if there are any mistakes. I haven't reread it to check for errors, so I hope it's fine as is. If anyone is interested in beta reading, then feel free to DM me. Until next time. Back in the observation room. The doors had just swung open and the quartet entered the room, filled with their peers only to be rushed by them while being overwhelmed with questions, still hyped up from the intense battle just prior. Seeing the battered Bakugo and seemingly roughed up, but Izuku was definitely worse for wear. He was now heaving and patches of his face seemed to be burning? Like there was no longer skin and it was just smoldering ashes. An excited pink-skinned girl came bouncing up to Izuku, before getting rather close to his face. Luckily our green-haired hero was too tired and low on his reserves of smoke to even react to her lack of boundaries. That was amazing, Midori. The way you dodged Bakugo and then launched him over your shoulder. She was quickly pushed out of the way by Kirishima, who lightly punched Izuku's shoulder, causing a few flakes of ash to come off. That was a pretty manly fight. But you're looking pretty beat up. You sure you don't need to go see recovery girl? Izuku could barely speak, still huffing and shaking his head. Sorry. My quirk uses a lot of smoke to power it, and that last attack was almost all of my reserves. My body wouldn't be able to heal because I'm made of smoke. It's literally my body. Anyone have a cigarette? He laughed and coughed as he looked at all their surprised faces. I'm kidding. All Might did as he should and began to quiet the group before they got too out of control. Come now, students. There is much to discuss before each of you are sent out to do your own battle simulation. Glancing to his trusty note cards, he double-checked on how he was supposed to be grading his students before looking to the teams that had returned. Before we begin the evaluation, I would like to say that you've all done wonderfully. You all took on the spirit of villainy and heroism, and you fought valiantly. The behemoth looked down at smaller students with his signature toothy grin. We'll continue, and before I tell you, would anyone like to guess as to who the MVP for this exercise was? The brunette stood toward the front of the herd, moved her hand into the air and began to speak. Sir, the MVP of this battle was Ida. From what I saw, Bakugo's every action was motivated by a personal grudge that made him reckless and not think clearly as he fought. This recklessness is the reason that he was so foolishly using such destructive attacks indoors. Midoriya, while also blinded by some grudge, was able to at least try to minimize the destruction he caused. Uraraka lost focus and gave away her position, and her final attack had too high a risk and utilized the fact that this was just a simulation with a dummy weapon. Ida had a plan and did his best to follow it. Only when both of the heroes arrived and subdued him was he defeated. The rest of the class was taken aback by her in-depth assessment of the test and looked up to her rather quickly. They were quick to acknowledge how smart she was, but they were still excited about such a vicious fight. The class quieted down as the next group of students went off to do their own exercise. Ida and Bakugo went to the nurse while the others watched the monitor screen. Uraraka and Izuku sat next to Yaoyorozu, to which she looked over from the screen, knowing that she would have to be working with one of them during her exercise. Midoriya, Uraraka. Because of the circumstances of the lots we drew, one of you will have to be my teammate for the exercise. Would one of you like to volunteer? She seemed pretty quiet and gentle, but there was an underlying urgency in her tone. The bubbly brunette spoke in almost a sickly tone. Sorry. Even though I only used my quirk twice, that last move really took a lot out of me. I think if I use it again I'll be really sick. Sorry about that. Izuku watched the both of them and then nodded. Yarozu, I can do it, but I need to recharge. If you can find a way to get me smoke and a good amount of it, I'll be able to help you out. It was only the second day, but Izuku was familiar with almost everybody's quirks. He didn't know everything, of course, but the gist was more than enough. If you can use your quirk to make smoke grenades when we first go in and during the prep phase, I'll be able to be a heavy hitter. She was quick to understand, having a similar quirk that relied on lipids instead of smoke, so she was happy to help her would-be partner. Because a smoke bomb was so small and relatively easy to create with her quirk, she made 4 of the small cylinders before handing them to Izuku. I made that many for a reason. Only use as many as you need to fill up and then use the rest during the match for both a distraction and as a way of refueling yourself. It will be a good surprise because we don't know who we'll be going up against. She explained diligently before turning back to the screen. Izuku went to All Might and told him he would be going out for a moment to refuel before stepping out the door, which was followed by the raven-haired ponytail girl. Izuku walked through the doors and looked around before going between 2 buildings and dropping one of the canisters after pulling the pin. It took a moment but soon began spinning rapidly while releasing thick smoke all through the alleyway. Wow, that's a lot more than I was expecting. He mumbled to himself before bracing himself and pulling the smoke into his body, immediately healing and filling up the flaking skin from his body. Once the canister finished making smoke and all of it had filled his body, Izuku put the last 3 canisters in various pockets in his jacket. Once they were away, he shook his arms and took a deep breath before doing an upward dash as far as he could, and getting about 3/4 the way up a 12-story building before dropping back down. My distance is growing. Probably as I use it more and I'll be able to use it more efficiently. He nodded to himself and was about to turn back to class when he was called out to. Midoriya. Before we go back, we should discuss what we're going to be doing in our match. We don't know who we'll be going up against, but we can think of a basic plan. He was a little surprised that she too had left the room when she could be learning about and evaluating the other students, but it made sense. Of course, we also don't know if we'll be on the hero or villain team yet, so we'll have to be pretty basic in our planning. If we are the hero team, I was thinking we could do a top-to-bottom push. The only problem is that I don't know how you can get to the top of the building. But if we can start on the top, we have the high ground on the stairs and they won't be expecting it. Momo understood his concern and shrugged as she thought of a few things. The fire escape could be my way up. You can fly up and unlock the ladder and then we make our way to the top. That's all we can really plan for the hero side. If we end up being the villains, I already have a couple of ideas. Izuku felt a little dumb having not thought of the most basic way of scaling the building, but that was where she made up for his forgetfulness. He blushed slightly as he thought of her being so smart. It seemed that her mind was equally as appealing as her body, and Izuku was doing his best to not have any perverted thoughts of his new teammate. With my quirk, I can make metal reinforcements on the doors, but the density of metal will take a bit out of me. We need to find a room with only 1 or 2 points of entry like windows and doors to conserve my quirk. I can also make traps and the like to slow them down or around the room to keep them from the bomb. She was quick to evaluate and create a plan without Izuku's quirk. That was something that Izuku caught onto that and put in his own input. That doesn't include my quirk. But my quirk isn't really all that subtle. But I should explain my quirk a little bit. My body is made of smoke. I can supercharge my body with it to get super strength, but I can use my smoke as long-range attacks as well. I have a couple special move that you've already seen. I used my sulfur bomb on Ida at the end and my basic smoke shot and cinder blast on Kaken. Smoke shot is like a smoke bullet and the cinder blast in like a smoke shotgun. I also used a special move on him, my cinder missile. I can only use 2. Before I have to recharge my smoke again. I also have my basic smoke dash and such. Oh yeah, since I can become smoke, I can move through vents silently and almost indefinitely because there is normally airflow. Momo listened to his long-winded explanation as well as his move set before she started coming up with a plan. Being able to move through small gaps in his smoke form would be a huge advantage, but for now that was all they could do without knowing who they would be going up against and whether or not they would be the heroes or villains. We should head back, Midoriya. They should be finishing up soon. And when we get in there, My quirk isn't really a battle quirk. I'll make myself a weapon, but if we get into a fight, I'll need your help. She was a little shy in asking, seeming like she was almost embarrassed to ask for help. Of course, I thought that would be the case, no offense to you, but my quirk is mostly meant to fight with, so I can handle most of the hand-to-hand fighting so long as you can be our last line of defense as villains. My quirk is perfect for close to mid-range combat, so I should be able to cover you while you set something up from behind. Izuku spoke as he walked and entered back into the observation room with Momo on his hip. The two of them walked in just in time to see Todoroki finish wiping the floor with Hagakure and Ojiro, not even giving them a chance to fight back as he walked right up to the dummy weapon and touched it, completing the exercise with no hassle. Well, Todoroki really does have a powerful quirk. No wonder he was one of the recommended students. Kirishima was the first to say what everyone was thinking, and then the others joined in. It's cool that he did it so quick, but there's no point in doing the exercise if only one of the 4 people actually gets some experience from it. That came from Jiro. Can't deny how effective he was though. Kaminari came in with his own opinion. Come on now, students. Although it was quick, he utilized young Shoji and his quirk before making a plan and trapping the villains in place before securing the bomb. He made an effective and efficient plan before executing it with utmost perfection. All Might followed up with a bellowing laugh. Before they returned, next up is... He slammed his hands into the 2 boxes and pulled out 2 monochrome ball. On the hero team, we have Team G versus Team C as the villains. Momo turned to Izuku and nodded. Midoriya. We're Team C, so we'll be the villains. Team G is Kaminari and Jair. I think we can do this if we set this up the right way. We just need to watch out for Kaminari's electricity. Izuku nodded and walked back to the door they had just returned from before heading to the building they would be using for their exercise. Come on, we should get settled before they're ready. Once they were in the building, they took the bomb to the 3rd most upper floor to give them more prep time since Jiro and Kaminari would have a long way to climb. Izuku was quick to make note of all the vents in and out of the room before helping Momo with the doorway reinforcements. This is a pretty creative way to hold them out. I wouldn't have even thought about using it like that. Izuku was quick to work on evaluating how she put her quirk into action and the potential it had in various situations. Should we at least give them a way in so they at least have a chance? I suppose you have a point. Neither Jiro or Kaminari have a super strength quirk, so it might be hard for them to get in the room. It will at least let them show off a little more of their skills. I'd like to see more of what they can do. Momo continued putting up the metal wall reinforcements in the door, but also left the window open as well as half of the other door into the room, so they would have to vault in on break through the window. I don't know a whole lot about either of their quirks, but I have a little bit of an idea. Jiro has her ear jacks, so she can probably use it to hear better? Maybe? Like when you plug your headphones into your phone to receive audio. I bet she can stab it into walls to hear a lot better. But if that is everything, she doesn't have a lot of offensive capabilities. That can't possibly be everything, but it's a good starting place. Izuku mumbled quickly as he evaluated her quirk. Across the big announcement speakers, both teams could hear All Might shouting as he gave the go-ahead for the hero team. Hero team. It is time to go. Best and defeat the villains. With that, Jiro walked in the front door with Kaminari in tow. She followed a pretty expected path, scouting out the first few rooms to make sure they were safe before jabbing her surprisingly strong ear jacks into the concrete walls and using a bastardist form of echolocation to find where the villain team was hiding. This rough version of echolocation was enough, and the heroes started running to the villains on the upper floor. The duo quickly ran up to the floor the villains were on before they slowed down. Back with Izuku and Momo, the moss-headed villain walked to the reinforced door and put his ear to it, listening and figuring out how close the heroes were to them. They know where we are. I'm going to go and see if I can slow them down and push them back. If we put them under time pressure, they'll start to make mistakes. Izuku walked back over to the vent and then dashed into it, flying through the vent and then around the hero team, ejecting himself behind them and standing slightly in the shadows. Putting on a persona for the sake of the exercise, our little conduit began his speech. Well, If it isn't the heroes sound check and Thunderboy, it is I, the marvelous villain. Smokestack. Emphasizing his point, Izuku puts his arms to his sides and then they suddenly disappear, replaced now by swirling storm of ash and cinders. Show me the true strength of you heroes. Kaminari was the first to act. Seeing the show that Izuku was putting on, he was quick to join in. It's Man of Thunder, thank you. And we will be taking you in and will be securing that bomb as well. His hands crackled and sparked as the electricity radiated from his body. In an instant, Kaminari lunged forward with both hands out at the smoking mass before he discharged a few hundred volts directly in front of him, only to be completely shrouded in a thick cloud of smoke that completely covered and moved behind him. Come on, boy of lightning. Show me what you've got. Kaminari heard this right before a weak version of Izuku's Cinder Blast was shot directly into his back, knocking him onto his face. Jiro moved a step back and started extending her ear lobes down to her boots, which had the speakers built into them. Izuku spun back to face the sound-based quirk user right as she plugged her jacks into her boots. Come on, Smokestack. Have a listen to my heart waves. In saying that, she cranked it up and put her heartbeat on blast, which assaulted Izuku's eardrums and forced him to his knees and covering his head as much as he could to prevent the noise from hurting him further. This was when Kaminari moved in from behind and went to put his hands against the greenette's back. But on an offbeat from Jiro's soundwave attack, he smoke-dashed forward and put his hand over her face before blasting a small amount of smoke and forcing her to the ground just before dashing back into the vents to retreat to the bomb room. Izuku didn't see it as he left, but Kaminari dashed over to Jiro and carefully held her up as she coughed the smoke out of her lungs. There wasn't much, but it was more than enough to put her in a state of panic. Back in the room, Izuku touched down before massaging his temples, carefully rubbing them to try and alleviate his headache. He looked to Momo before speaking. I think Jiro is going to be more of an issue than Kaminari. She can plug her ear jacks into her boots and project what I assume is her heartbeat. She cranked it up to 11 and I could hardly move. I had to wait for the in-between beat before I could stop her. They'll be expecting it this time. Momo listened intently while setting up tiny threads around the pillars to act as a sort of barrier to keep the heroes out. That does seem like a problem. I can make some earplugs for the both of us or maybe a pair of noise-canceling communicators. While the villains were talking, the heroes reached the door and tried to lift up the slats. With only around 8 minutes remaining, the heroic duo quickly made their way to the room beside them and climbed out the window to see if the objective room had a window they could enter through. Kaminari went first and stared down the side of the building before shuffling across to the window. Jiro. They left the window open and there's another door on the other side. They only barricaded the door halfway up. You stay here and I'll go over to it. Wait for my signal and break through the window. Without another word, he ducked to the other side and re-entered the building to flank over to the barricade. Jiro saw a tuft of his yellow hair as he crouched next to the barricade and then, in what seemed like an instant, he vaulted over the metal slats and sprinted as close as he could to where Izuku and Momo were talking before slamming his foot down and shouting. Special move. Indiscriminate shock. 1.3 million volts. With a loud outcry, his quirk charged up and shot out of him all at once, going in every single direction, and the close proximity to the surrogate villains forced them to take the brunt of it. Izuku reacted quickly and smoke dashed in front of Momo, covering her in an extremely dense cloud of smoke which acted as a sort of barrier and insulator for her. The cost came, however, and because of the ash particles being accelerated, they couldn't stabilize back into a humanoid form, thus hovering as a cloud of smoke in all through the room. Jiro figured that huge final move was the signal and put her boot against the window before blasting it with a high-frequency sound wave, shattering it before she made her dash inside and straight for the bomb. Unluckily for her, the smoke had done a good job and the brunette only had a tingling feeling in her body across her skin. With both of their male counterparts out of commission, the girls went at it head-on. Momo pulled a bow staff out of her leg and began spinning it around quickly, cracking it against Jiro's side and hitting her arms and immediately making a bruise well up at the site of impact. But like Jiro did with Izuku just a few minutes before, she plugged her jacks into her boots and pumped her heartbeat into the room. Sorry, Yaoyorozu. I really need to take this win. She stepped forward and dropped her staff while covering her ears, opening her up to an attack from the front. But just as the hero brought her fist down, Momo dodged forward and took her leg out while she was off balance, taking her to the floor and quickly securing her with capture tape. Not today, Jiro. I will be the victor of this exercise. Momo's response was quite a bit louder than she needed it to be, but then she reached to her ears and pulled out little orange foam plugs. Midoriya warned me about your boots from the earlier attack. We both put those in order to avoid your special move. But even with the plugs, my ears are still ringing. Your skill and control over your quirk is quite impressive. While she elaborated on her plan, Izuku's body had reformed, but he was still out of it from the shock to his nervous system, and then she made her way to Kaminari and then wrapped him up while he was still in his Thunderbolt mode, allowing for an extremely easy capture. No muss and no fuss, and that was when All Might played back on the speakers. The villains win. With only precious seconds left to spare. Done, young ones. You have done well. Let the bots take Midoriya and Kaminari to the nurse for now, and you girls come back to the observation room. We will discuss your performance here. Ever an enthusiastic man he was, he barely held back from shouting every single words as Momo unwrapped Jiro. That was a good fight. If Midoriya hadn't warned me about your boots, I'm sure that you would have beaten us since my teammate went down protecting me from yours. Thanks. You guys did really well to prepare for us. Neither of our quirks are great for entering and getting into places that are trying to keep us out. Together, the two young ladies walked back to the assessment room in order to talk to All Might and have him evaluate their performance of their time fighting to beat each other. The day following the battle training event, Izuku woke at home, sore from head to toe because of the fighting and resulting injuries. As much as his smoke healed his injuries, his body could still feel, and this was something completely unavoidable. He rolled and sat up on his bed, placing his feet on soft carpet floor before getting up and quickly rushing through his morning routine. Showering, brushing his teeth and putting on his uniform, he dashed out of the house with a quick goodbye to his mother before making his way to school. As Izuku came around the final bend before arriving at his new school, only to be immediately swarmed by the massive media outlets that rushed him, practically jamming the microphone down his throat while he tried to weave his body through the crowd. Excuse me, what's it like to be learning from All Might? The journalist all but shouted at the younger man, frightening him slightly, so he put his hands up, waving them a little while stepping back. I gotta get to class. Sorry. The nervous boy dashed in the form of smoke directly through the crowd, before reforming and walking through the massive concrete gate that guarded the entrance of UA High. Sorry. I'm already running behind. As he turned around and ran forward, he caught sight of Yaoyorozu and Jiro with Kaminari standing beside them. A quick jog got him caught up and he walked beside them, matching their pace. Good morning, Midoriya. You look much better than after yesterday's matches. The brunette gave him a warm smile, a light blush adorning her cheeks as she spoke. Her voice was soft and there was definitely something there beside just a camaraderie. Not that he would notice. Just receiving a compliment from her was a huge deal and made him extremely happy. Thankfully, his recent experience over the last few days came in clutch, reducing his blush before he spoke. Good morning to you too. How are you feeling after our match? Izuku was happy to keep talking, as they entered the building and walked to the upper floor where their homeroom was. I'm feeling better. My ears were ringing all day after, even with having the plugs in. She rubbed the side of her head, attempting to soothe her aching temples as she walked. Jiro joined in with a laugh before she nudged her jack into Yaoyorozu's shoulder. Your ears hurt all day after. Think about my arm and ribs. You hit like a truck with that. Bow staff. The only reason I don't have a bruise is because Recovery Girl helped me out. Izuku laughed and huffed before looking over to Kaminari with a head shake. If you guys want to talk about pain, imagine that nuclear bomb that Kaminari dropped on me. I did my best to cover Yaoyorozu, but that meant I took the brunt of the force. I couldn't even reform for a while because I was knocked out. I swear, I still think I'm buzzing because of it. He laughed and then walked the small crowd into the room, before they broke off and all took their own seats. It was right as the last person sat down that the yellow caterpillar sat up and out popped Aizawa, Their teacher. Good work with yesterday's battle training. I looked at all of your evaluations and you were all pretty well rounded. The dark-haired man looked across the room before his eyes settled on Izuku and the ashen-haired boy behind him. Midoriya and Bakugo. I watched the playback of your match and I am not happy with the level of damage that you caused to the building. You need to be more cautious with how you use your quirks. When both the boys nodded their acknowledgement, the teacher looked back down the center of the class as he spoke. Aside from that, I have no issues. Now, on to classroom business. I have a bit of an announcement. Today you'll all be choosing your class representatives. All of the students cried out at the same time after thinking that it was such a normal school thing considering all of the things that they had been through so far. Most of the students quickly jumped out of their seats and threw their hands in the air. From the calmer people like Jiro, who was still sitting, she only said, "I'd like to do it." While Kirishima, the loudest of the group, rocketed from his chair and had both hands in the air, "I want to be president. Let me do it." All the voices were silent, and the hands slowly fell as Ida stood up and immediately went to the front of the room. Leading many is a heavy responsibility, but ambition does not equate to equality. If this person is truly going to represent us, then it must be someone that all of us elect. It must be someone that we feel represents us well. Therefore, I forward the motion that the class representatives be chosen through an election. Azui was the first to speak up about the flaws. But if we only push it to a vote, everyone is just going to vote for themselves because we haven't been able to really get to know each other. Ida practically interrupted her with how fast he responded to her. That is precisely why this will work. For anyone who gets more than one vote, they will be the ones that are the best for the job. That will be the preliminaries. Those that get more than one vote will move on and be the only ones you can vote for. Sensei, is this acceptable? Their teacher, still in the process of climbing into his cocoon, looked up to the robotic student with an uncaring look on his face. "I don't care. Whatever you do, make it quick. You need to have someone picked by the time class ends." With that, the teacher dropped down and laid behind the desk at the front, allowing the students to do as they wished to choose their representatives. Ida nodded quickly and walked to the board before writing everyone's names with a line next to them that would indicate how many votes they got. He then passed out strips of paper to have people write the names of their nominees. Once finished, he walked to the board and began marking the amount of points each person got. Izuku and Jiro were at the top with 3 votes each, and below them, with 2 votes, was Yaoyorozu and Azui. All of the other names were quickly erased before a new round of voting began. Alright, with the preliminaries over, the final vote will be between Midoriya, Jiro, Yaoyorozu, and Azui. Those that are in the running will not be voting this round. He went back through the room and carefully collected the rest of the papers. Once done, he went and stood at the front of the class with a small bag full of the papers. He decided to do it like the older pre-quirk TV show called Survivor, where he would stand at the front and read the names out and show everyone, so they knew he wasn't swinging the vote. Alright, here we go. Izuku, Yaoyorozu, Izuku, Tsuyu, Jiro, Yaoyorozu, Izuku, Yaoyorozu, Izuku, Jiro, Izuku, Jiro, Yaoyorozu. Every time he would show a name, he held up and turned the paper slip around and showed it to the class before putting a tally beside the name it belonged to. After being counted, Izuku was in the lead with a total of 5 votes. Yaoyorozu and Jiro tied for second with 4 points, and Tsuyu was in third with 2 points. Because Midoriya had the most votes, he will be the class president. We'll move on to a tie-breaker final round between Jiro and Yaoyorozu. Everyone nodded and Tsuyu and Izuku's names were erased from the board while everyone put their vote down, with Izuku and Tsuyu being able to vote now. Once again, Ida walked around and collected the paper slips again, stoically walking to the front of the room before repeating what he had done just before. Yaoyorozu, Jiro, Yaoyorozu, 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 Jiro, Yaoyorozu, Jiro, Yaoyorozu, Jiro. After tallying up all of the marks and counting up the answers, Ida spoke again. As you all can see, Yaoyorozu has a total of 10 votes and Jiro has 7, which makes Yaoyorozu the vice president. After all of the voting had been done, Izuku and Momo both walked up to the front of the room and bowed politely. Izuku stood straight and smiled wide before speaking. It's an honor to be chosen by everyone. I'll do my best to be the greatest class president that you all could ask for. Please come to me if you need anything or if there are any issues. The tall brunette to his left watched him and smiled happily before giving a little speech of her own. I feel the same as Midoriya. I hope you all feel comfortable enough to approach me with any problems that you think I can help you with. She followed with a shallow bow before they walked back to their seats. Class ended soon after and they broke off for lunch, forming up a new group consisting of Ida, Ochako, Izuku, Yaoyorozu, Jiro and Denki. They all still dropped at the same table, happily getting into conversation. Hey guys. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what responsibilities come with being a class president. Is it just the simpler stuff like making sure that everyone is getting along well together, or is it more broad like actually having a school-wide student board? I've done my research into the school, but class presidents weren't exactly a topic I focused on learning about. Luckily, Momo spoke up and decided to give the moss-headed hero a crash course in hero school diplomacy. The responsibilities of the class president are pretty broad. Like you said, it is your job to deal with the concerns of your classmates but also to present their ideas to the student council because you are our class representative. But you will also be responsible for organizing events and helping to manage funds. At some point, the two of us will have to sit down and choose our class cabinet. Izuku nodded along with what she was saying, pulling a notebook out of seemingly nowhere and scribbling down some of the more important details of what the tall beauty had said. Thank you. I'm sure that'll help. While the two school representatives talked about some of the fine details, Ochako and Ida had a little chat of their own before the brunette nudged against Izuku while laughing. Hey Deku, don't you think that Ida is totally a rich kid? We were talking about how he wanted to be the class president, but he, humbly, felt you were the correct choice. What do you think? She stared up at Izuku with huge puppy dog eyes. Izuku looked down from Ochako up to Ida before tilting his head to the side. Ida, are you a rich kid? It doesn't change anything, but you don't need to hide it. The rigid boy took a deep breath and blushed a bit before he spoke. I don't like people to know so people can't use me for it. But my family is a well-known hero family of which I am the second son. My brother is the turbo hero, Ingenium. Izuku jumped at the idea of being able to talk about heroes and interjected a bit. Of course. He employs 65 sidekicks at his office in Tokyo, some of which have even moved on to become much more popular pro-heroes. He would have gone on for longer but was stopped as Ida continued. Yes, he is my brother. He follows the rules and is a truly beloved hero. It's because of my brother that I have been inspired to become a hero. Though I don't think I'm ready to lead anyone just yet. As if it were waiting for him to finish, the alarm bells began ringing loudly and over the intercom, an automated voice recording began to instruct the students, security level 3 has been broken. All students, please evacuate in an orderly fashion. Level 3? What's that? Izuku just threw the question out to the air and got a rather quick response from one of the upperclassmen. It means someone has broken onto the campus. The student shouted as he runs into the crowd along with the majority of the students. Izuku took a deep breath and looked around while trying to keep calm as he was practically captured by the wave of people that were all running down the hallway. He was quick to move to the side and look out the window, which was luckily facing the main entrance to the school. Wait, it's just the media that found a way in. They're all overthinking it. In a quick effort, he used his smoke form to move through the crowd with ease, before reforming beside Momo. Excuse me, can you make a megaphone? The reporters got through the gate and now they're coming to the school, there's no reason to panic. Over all the screaming and shouting, Yaoyorozu only got the words make, megaphone and media from what he said. She didn't quite understand, but it was enough that she lifted the megaphone and handed it over to him, having full faith that the class president knew what he was doing. Quickly taking the megaphone and looking all around for a good spot to speak from, and the best spot was over a large exit sign. Using his smoke dash, Izuku spiraled through the air and crashed into the wall before holding onto the sign as tightly as possible while bringing the mic to his mouth. Everybody calm down. It's just the press. One of them got through the gates. There's no need to panic. He quickly pointed to the window where everyone could easily see that the teachers were rounding up the media people that threatened to enter the campus. The teachers already have the situation under control. There is no need to panic. He watched carefully as the students began to calm down and not rush so quickly through the exit. Once the students were mostly calmed down, Izuku happily jumped down and regrouped with some of the classmates that were waiting for him. That's exactly why I voted for you as the class president. Such quick thinking and leadership. Ida quickly patted him on the back and smiled happily as they followed the crowd out of the building to their proper evacuation point. After everything had been settled, the students went back to the classroom and resettled themselves and then proceeded to have normal rest of their day, all things considered. Izuku had been praised for his quick thinking and initiative, as well with the students happy that they had chosen him to be their representative. After school, a group of students began walking out. The cluster of 6 was happy to go together and walk to the train station. Mono slowly came over to Izuku and walked beside him. "Excuse me, Midoriya. Are you available to come and select the rest of the class council? I'm sure that would prefer that we get everyone selected as soon as possible." She was extremely confident and almost excited to be doing council work. Izuku nodded after a moment before pulling his phone out. "Yeah, I can definitely do that. Just let me text my mom to let her know. Want to just go sit down at a cafe? It shouldn't take too long to pick everyone out." Izuku texted his mother to let him know what he would be doing and why he would be home late. It seemed Momo had already done so, and the pair led the rest of the group to the train station where they had all gone their separate ways except for the class reps. They made their way to a small cafe that was only a few blocks away and then sat down at a 2-person booth against one of the back corners. Sitting opposite of each other, Izuku brought a book from his bag and opened it to a new page before writing a few people he thought would be suitable. "Alright, President and Vice President are taken care of, but that leaves us with the Treasurer, Secretary, and the Historian. That's more than a quarter of the class, so we should get a lot of opinions." Momo had mimicked Izuku and pulled out a notebook to write down some notes of her own. She agreed with his ideas and thoughts on the amount of people and then began brainstorming who would be best for each position. "I think it would be best that we decide who shouldn't be chosen. That would immediately restrict who we can choose by quite a bit. I suggest we put Koda, Aoyama, Bakugo, and Sato on the no-go list. I just don't think they would like or really suit any of the positions available." She sighed and imagined the quiet Koda trying to talk to people and organize events as well as possibly take intense criticisms. She would feel bad if she forced him into something that would be so foreign and hard for him. Izuku had made a list of all the students and then crossed out the names she said before also crossing out Zero as well. "What do you think about Ishido for the Historian? I think she would love to take a camera and record what we do around the school and at events. I can definitely see her keeping track of all that." Yaoyorozu nodded her agreement as she thought that Mina would be a pretty good fit for the position and she was extremely charismatic, so people would quickly accept her in the position. "I'd have to agree. But I also think that Uraraka would fit the position too, don't you think? Maybe she's a little bit too absent-minded? I feel she would lose focus quite easily. So yes, let's put her as our nominee, and then maybe if she declines then we can ask Uraraka to fill the spot." Izuku wrote down both of their names before moving on to the next one. "Alright, Secretary next. Who do you think would be pretty good with funds? I was thinking Shoji because he can listen to multiple people and record information at the same time, but I'm not sure how much he would actually enjoy the job." There were many pros to having him as a part of the team with little cons, but it was always good to have a second option. Just in case he said no, another person would be important to have. I would have to agree. Shoji would be a perfect choice, but just in the case that he doesn't want the position, Ojiro would be a great second if Shoji doesn't want to take on the workload. That makes up for those two, now it's just the treasurer. Izuku had a few ideas, but at the front of the list was someone who already knew how to manage a good amount of money already because of his family. I think Ito would be the best choice. I'm sure he'd accept the role too because of how much he wanted to be the president. She took a breath after her long-winded explanation and was happy to have the thoughts out. Having someone as her president who was smart and logical definitely eased her nerves. Yeah, that works. Ida would be the best option. Izuku quickly wrote his name down on the list before relaxing in his seat. Well, that's that. I like our choices, but we have a little more to do. Aizawa-sensei gave me this sheet that we need to look at. I planned on bringing it up later after I came up with some ideas. Izuku retrieved his bag by his side before pulling out a sheet with some future events that would be coming up the year. We have the sports festival coming up in the coming weeks, and I'd like to give the class a heads up, so we can start preparing. Momo drew a separation line on her page and tried to make up some ideas for what they could do. That's good to know. We can let everyone know to increase their training to get ready for the events. Yeah, I think everyone would appreciate knowing in advance if they don't already know about it. But we also have the USJ trip tomorrow on the itinerary. We have a guest hero to show us the ropes on how to rescue others. She slowly slid to the side and out of the booth before putting her backpack on. Well, now that we've selected our council, we should get home. We've had a long day and we have a lot of work to start doing. It was nice to get this out of the way. She let out a quiet. She spoke as Izuku followed her and got out of the booth with his notes before walking out and holding the door for the taller teen. They left the smell of the roasted beans and into the city where they parted ways to prepare for tomorrow. The following day, Class 1A had been seated, and when Aizawa walked in the room for their basic hero training class, they had learned early on that being quote-unquote illogical was one of the worst offenses, and thus they were silent. Listen up, I'd rather not have to repeat myself too much today. Today's basic hero training will be supervised by All Might, myself, and one other because we will be preparing you to deal with natural disasters and everything from fires to floods because we're doing rescue training. There were whispers across the room, some people happy with the idea of rescue training and others wishing it was more battle training like they had done before. The training site is a bit far away, and because it's a live site you can choose whether or not you want to wear your costumes because some of them may be ill-suited for this class. Please think logically and then meet up outside at the buses. Knowing their teacher, the students were quick to change and get to the bus stop outside. Izuku and Momo were the first out and stood just in front of the bus as the students came closer. Midoriya, are you sure your hero costume will be useful for this activity? It seems rather bulky. Yaoyorozu was genuinely concerned, and to be honest, it made sense. I kinda thought that too. So, I got rid of a layer underneath and left the rest. Because my clothes change into smoke with my body, the weight doesn't really matter. The clothing is mostly for the aesthetic. Even if I get shot with a gun, it hurts, but I can heal if I get smoke. The elaboration was quicker than normal because the rest of the class had come and were talking near the door of the bus, which they were soon herded inside of by their class reps. Aizawa followed them in last before the driver took them off and drove them to the USJ. Hey Midoriya, how exactly does your quirk work? I've seen elemental manipulation quirks like Todoroki's, but yours seems to be your entire body. Surprisingly, it was Kirishima who started the conversation. Izuku was a bit flustered to be called out on his quirk but was more than happy to oblige some information. Yeah. My quirk is a bit weird. I haven't named it yet either because I'm not completely sure how it works. I only got my smoke because I helped a guy in a car crash. I grabbed his arm and somehow saw his memories. When it finally stopped, my hands were smoking and I could change my body into smoke. I've learned to manipulate it in my body and out. Some of the students were surprised by the idea of him copying a quirk from someone else but didn't think less of him. That sounds pretty strong to me. My hardening quirk is nothing like yours. Yours is really flashy and mine is kinda boring. Not that great for a hero. He looked away dejectedly, but Izuku was quick to refute the claim. I don't think so. Having a flashy quirk doesn't mean you'll be a great hero. You're a perfect sword and shield, which makes for a great hero. You can protect and attack in a moment's notice. If I get his, I poof into a cloud of smoke. I think you'll be a great hero. His enthusiasm brought back the grin and Kirishima nodded in agreement. Yeah, I'm gonna be a great hero. The bus ride after that was pretty quiet, each group chatting with each other about what their training would be and how they would finally be doing real hero work. The exception to this being the talk about flashy quirks and Bakugo getting angry, which was far from out of the norm. The ride to the USJ was surprisingly quick. The students unloaded off the bus and walked inside where they met their mystery instructor for the day. the astronaut-looking hero standing in front of them. Good morning, students. I built this facility myself to ensure that students like you would know how to deal with natural disasters when they arise. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. The students took their time to take in the massive interior of the USJ. The various disaster zones could be seen from the entrance, leaving the students in awe of their sheer size. Before we start the exercise, I would like to talk about a couple things, maybe 3 or 4. I'm sure most of you have very dangerous quirks. Mine is called Black Hole. While I have chosen to use it for a good purpose, it is an extremely dangerous quirk which could kill in a moment's notice. That's why today's training will be important, so you can see exactly how dangerous your quirks are and how to use them to save people. Right as she finished speaking, a purple rift appeared in the courtyard at the base of the stairs and a mass amount of people began to file out of the growing fog while Aizawa was quick to pull his goggles down and scan the crowd. 13. Take care of the students. The dark-haired teacher was quick to move down toward the steps that lead to the villains beneath. Aizawa, you can't take on that many alone. Izuku spoke up first and prepared to dash out to stop him but received a glare from his teacher that cancelled his quirk, making him trip. You can't be a hero if you're only a one-trick pony. Their teacher shouted and practically flew down the stairs while 13 pulled the students behind them as the gaseous villain from before had teleported to the students. 13 was quick to speak up, all students get outside and evacuate now. Go and get help. Her words were forced out quickly as the smog villain finished forming and stared down at the students. Unfortunately, I can't let you students leave, that would put quite a damper on our plans for sure. Although, I was told to be polite, so allow me to introduce us. We are the League of Villains, and today we've come to kill the Bastion of Hope. All might. The more aggressive students rushed at the villain. Bagoku pet his fist back and moved his explosive palm out while Kirishima jumped and did a flying roundhouse kick right into his metal neck guard. While they did little damage, they were able to move him backward and keep him away. I should remember that even though you are just children, you really are the cream of the CRP. Truly the best of the best. The students immediately began working together. Izuku's sulfur bomb was launched right under him and exploded around him, inhibiting him from moving while there was an audible coughing that came from the center of the fog. Ida, you're the fastest, get back to school and tell the teachers. We need reinforcements. Izuku shouted to the taller teen who went to argue when Izuku continued. You're the fastest and you'll be the only one of us who can actually get there in time. Now get going. This spurred Ida into action and he rushed to the door while Izuku, Kirishima and Bakugo held the aggressor back. Sato and Shoji helped to slam the door open and let Ida out while the boys had moved and 13 had activated their quirk and began disintegrating the villain who was able to use his warp gates to use their own quirk against them. While Ida had been getting out, the smoke enveloped the teens and started pulling them into the void, taking them and dropping them all across the USJ. By the time it was all set and done, the only students remaining with 13 were Ochako, Sato, Siro, Mina and Shoji. In the flooded ship zone, Izuku began falling from the sky, directly over the top of the human-made lake and quickly started spiraling toward the ship in his ashen form before crashing into the wall and regaining his thoughts. That's a pretty crazy warp quirk. He was able to move me this far and I'm probably not the only one either. Izuku quickly jumped back when he heard a wet hand slap against the side of the boat. Izuku prepared a smoke shot and then peeked over the edge of the railing only to see Tsuyu scaling up the side of the wall. He was quick to cancel his quirk and pull the girl over to where it was safe. Are you okay? That was a pretty big fall. While she got her bearings back, Izuku walked to the side of the boat and looked over the edge to see a cluster of villains swimming around in the water below them. Midoriya, we seem to be in trouble out here. These villains must have been planning this for a long time. They have strong water quirks which are perfect for the flood zone. Izuku turned back to her and nodded as he thought about what she said. Yeah, the villains have perfect quirks for this zone, so they must have been planning this. But what about Izuku? Her quirk is perfect here too. Hey Tsuyu, I think I have some good news. It seems like they don't know what our quirks are. Why else would they have put you here? This is your own element. That means we have the element of surprise on our side. The boat was suddenly rocked, A man below with a strong water manipulation quirk had essentially sliced the boat in half, and it was now sinking at an even faster rate than it was before, making the duo to panic immediately. Millions of thoughts filled the greenette's head as he began doing his best to formulate a plan that would keep them out of harm's way. 2. I'm going to give you an opportunity to get out of here, but the window is going to be small. The moment my attack hits the water, jump. Izuku went to the edge and the water was barely 10 feet further down from where he stood. He would only have one shot. Izuku took a few steps back before running at the railing and using it as a springboard to dash even higher for more time to charge his next move. Activating both quirks, Izuku forced the smoke in right arm to become more dense, and so his arm bulged until it was a few times bigger than before and sparkled with pulsing red cinders that threatened to start a fire on his skin. With a hefty swing ripped from Bakugo's book, Izuku brought his fist toward the water while screaming, "Unholy Haymaker!" through his entire swing. The force from the swing exploded away from his arm along with all the smoke he had mustered, creating a hurricane of pure force that emptied half the lake and created a whirlpool with the other half that remained. The power of his was not without its tolls. His body still couldn't handle the backlash, so not only did his arm not reform, but he was unable to dash to the land, and so he plummeted straight to the half-emptied lake. It was only as he was a few feet away from the water's surface that he had been grabbed by Tsuyu's extended tongue. She used their combined momentum to redirect Izuku closer to the shore. He landed just on the water's edge, and the frog heroine was quick to pull him back to the land, where he coughed and brought a hand to his non-existent right arm. Where his arm once attached to his torso was now a tentacle of wafting smoke that wasn't able to reform back into his normal form. This was the consequence of overusing his powers with the improper amount of control. Izuku sat up, looking around quickly before calming at the sight of the frog-quirked girl being safe. "Are you okay? You were hurt because of me, were you?" Tsuyu couldn't speak. This boy had just lost his arm to protect her and was selflessly asking her if she was okay while he was missing an arm. "Midoriya, you really shouldn't be asking me if I'm okay when you're missing an arm." She was almost upset that he had seemingly wounded himself just to get her out of their past predicament safely. It took the boy a while to really focus on the missing limb, but shook his head when he saw it. "I'll be okay. So long as we can get to the conflagration zone, I'll be able to recharge and grow my arm back. Don't be too worried." The nonchalantness of his words concerned her, but she believed him and did her best to get over her shock. "We need to get back to 13. They're back at the entrance, and the only way to get there is to go through or around the courtyard." Izuku was about to continue when a sickening crunch echoed from the center of the plaza. The students turned just to see a giant purple-skinned monster sitting on top of their teacher, who had just had his arm crushed in the monster gargantuan grasp. They held their breath as the beast's other hand reached down to the back of his head and lifted it before slamming it back against the concrete, making them both crack. It was at the same time that the portal villain from before had reappeared and started to speak to who seemed to be the leader of this league of villains. 13 has been incapacitated, but there were some students that I was unable to warp away. One of them managed to escape while I dealt with the rest." The man covered in hands visibly twitched at the sound of the situation. "You know, Kurojiri, if it weren't for the fact that you were our escape plan for this dungeon, I would snap your neck." He seemed to calm down after a moment, and he tapped the tips of his fingers together before speaking again. "I suppose that means this is game over? Game over for now. We don't stand a chance against dozens of pro heroes. We're leaving." Izuku and Tsuyu let out visible sighs of relief at hearing that, but there was still an ominous feeling in the air. This was hardly the end of their violent attack. "Tsuyu, I don't think they're done yet. Kurojiri, before we leave, why don't we leave a couple of dead kids?" Unbelievably fast, the man was in front of Tsuyu and had his hand moving straight to her face. There was no time left, and Izuku's body moved on its own like it did 10 months before. He turned into smoke and dashed between the two and grabbed the frog girl, pulling her away while keeping his eyes on the leader of the villains. "Keep your disgusting hands off of her." Izuku dove straight back into the fray and sprinted at the hand-face villain with his good fist reared back. With a mighty swing, he channeled all his energy left and slammed his fist straight at the man in front of him. In an instant, The man mumbled and the beast from before immediately appeared in front of him and acted as a shield, taking the full brunt of a 100% smash and one for all enhanced smoke shot. Izuku slowly opened his eyes as he realized what had happened. His body was unbroken, but the thing before him was completely fine. It tanked a full-powered punch and wasn't even breathing heavy. "Tsu, get Aizawa out of here. I'll take care of these guys." Izuku's eyes didn't leave the Nomu as it prepared to hit him. It was about here that the rest of the students had wrapped up their battles and they had converged at the base of the stairs, a few like Kirishima and Shiro going around the plaza to help the girl get their teacher back to safety. It was just as Jiro, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari got there that they saw the beast bring his fist forward and hit Izuku full force. The shockwave was visible and could be felt from the other side of the grounds. Izuku stood no chance against him. He had been running on empty before he had saved his friend. There was nothing he could have done to protect himself as he was mercilessly attacked. The force was body-shattering and his classmates were forced to watch his broken body ragdoll all the way to the opposite side of the plaza, sent skipping along the edge of the flooded zone and then deep into the conflagration zone. Midoriya! Midoriya! Ochako was the loudest of the group, watching one of her best friends be beaten in what was a killing blow. Bakugo saw as he came onto the center. He was the first to move and he blasted his way to the monster that had essentially just killed the boy that he was supposed to be the one to defeat. "What did you do to Deku?" Explosion after explosion, Bakugo let all his fury loose. All his anger and hatred came out as he became more violent and aggressive. "It looks like that's one brat down. What's the point of having heroes if they can't save you? Where is your precious All Might now?" The wild man had seemingly become more and more crazy as he watched the child's broken body bounce along the ground. Todoroki was the next to come out and earn his stripes. A glacier slammed into the monster and encased it momentarily before it broke itself out and continued its assault. Little did everyone notice, there was no longer any smoke rising from the top of the conflagration zone. It was quite odd as the fires were practically still liking at the roof of the building and their size would mean that they should be releasing an abhorrent amount of smoke. It didn't take long for the monster that dominated a pro hero to begin doing the same to a couple of brave kids that stood out from the others. Right as the Nomu's giant fist was upon Bakugo's face, a demonic roar echoed through the building. The students that had gotten to the top of the stairs fell in surprise and the temperature of the plaza began rising a few degrees as a being began to rise up from the flames. A cloud of smoke began taking shape, tall, curled and pointed horns stuck out from its skull-shaped head. Its eyes cracked and flickered like a firestorm while its mouth full of red-hot cinders. Muscles became pronounced and arms grew down into sharp, pointed fingers. The sight before them couldn't be described by anything besides demonic. It was as if a demon was crawling directly out of the flames of hell. The legless beast was connected to the flames by a genie-esque tail as it began crawling to the center of the plaza. Kurogiri. This wasn't supposed to be the boss fight. These were meant to be the grunts that lead up to the final boss, not some side boss that we weren't prepared for. What is this monster doing on the side of the heroes? The Mist Man was speechless. The pure killing intent had most people on their knees as the demon began thrashing its arms and slammed both fists into the Nomu before grabbing it around the legs and slamming it everywhere, trashing the entire building. It was then that the main doors of the USJ were blown wide open and the number one hero burst onto the scene. "Have no fear. I'm here. What in God's name is that?" All Might quickly turned to Ojiro who had just gotten Aizawa to the top of the stairs. "Young Ojiro. What is happening? Where did that demon come from?" "All Might. I don't know. That monster just came out of Conflagration Zone but it's protecting us. The League of Villains attacked, and the demon started protecting us from the thing it's swinging around down there." All Might couldn't even tell what was happening, so he would have to deal with priorities first. The students were the most important thing. Because the smoke monster was keeping the villains at bay, he took advantage of his incredible speed. All Might sprinted down to the plaza and picked up the last of the students. Bakugo, Kirishima and Todoroki were the last to be getting out of there. By the time All Might had finished gathering them and got them out the door, he had roughly 5 minutes before he would no longer be able to hold his hero form. While All Might had been gathering his disciples, The demon had shrunk considerably. It went from nearly touching its head on the roof to being only twice the height of the Nomu. It had grown legs and was marching toward the Nomu, who was in the process of regrowing a leg which it had lost due to the force of being swung around so much. Shirogaki, it is time to leave. There is no way we can win this. There is no way we can fight a demon like this, especially not when All Might has shown up. A new echo filled the villain's ears, a deep bass and an almost incomprehensible sound. But they heard it. It echoed in their skulls and rocked them to their very core. Shiraki. Shiraki. It figured out his name and was quick to abandon its toy, choosing to instead hunt after who threatened the class. The demon was on the hunt and the killing intent was suffocating to say the least. Its entire body rocked back before shooting forward with smoldering red veins covering its entire body. It covered the distance in less than a second and smashed into Shigaraki. Kurogiri took the initiative and opened a warp gate under his emissary, taking him back to his base and then doing the same for himself. Back in the USJ, there was pin-drop silence. For what felt like hours, there was nothing until the demon released a high-pitched shriek that shattered glass and made building crumble in the ruins zone. It was soon after that it fell to its knees and the excess smoke began dissipating and left a horribly beaten and nearly disfigured Izuku. All Might had been watching from a distance to ensure that nothing would happen further, but was shocked when it was his own successor that had been able to protect his classmates. "I'm sorry I wasn't here earlier. It was my job to protect you and I couldn't even do that. I'm so sorry, young Midoriya." The number one hero scooped up the child in his arms before rushing straight back outside and ignored everyone around him. He took Izuku straight to Recovery Girl where he could get proper care after taking so much damage. "Shigaraki needs immediate medical attention and then we need to talk. It seems that there is a new threat that may already be enough to cause some serious problems before too long." Kurogiri quickly began to administer aid to his emissary but eventually left him to rest. He would have to reconsider his approach if the heroes had a real-deal demon on their side that could completely thrash their counter to All Might. The teacher's voice had come back from the TV, surprisingly quiet as he watched the security footage from the attack. "Interesting. That is quite interesting." The bright white lights and a strong disinfectant smell greeted Izuku when he woke up in the high school's hospital room, not a single bandage on his body because of how his quirk worked. His injuries purely required smoke and rest. Izuku was quick to sit up and started looking around trying to figure out why he was there up until the memories flooded his head and he tried to get up, only to have a gentle hand push his chest back down into the bed. "Young Midoriya, please relax and try not to panic, everyone is safe. You saved all of your classmates and even your own teachers. You did it." His MSDR's voice was warm and gentle as he explained the situation. Knowing that all of his friends were safe, he let out a breath that he didn't know he was holding. Izuku laid his head into his pillow while looking up at Toshinori. "Thank goodness. I'm happy that they were able to get away safely. But what did I do? You said I saved them, but all I remember was when I got hit by the Nomu. I think I passed out when it hit me and now I'm here." Izuku's confusion was genuine and Small Might explained quickly. "You don't remember then, huh? I guess that makes sense. Your body was probably moving by itself." Toshinori reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone where he showed a video that started when Izuku got hit and then played until the villain known as Shigaraki was teleported away with his compatriot. That thing was me? I've never been able to do something on that scale before. I can barely bulk up my body without passing out from exhaustion." Izuku scrubbed back on the video and looked down at where he was still connected to the conflagration zone and used its constant smoke source to maintain his body. "So that was the reason I could hold it. I had an infinite source of smoke to pull from. I can't believe that was me. Even at the end when I fought them head-on. You've been out since yesterday, young Midoriya. You really pushed your limits and went beyond. I believe that if you weren't there, not only would your classmates have been severely injured, but I think that my time limit would have been reduced as well. You are truly stronger than you think." The older man patted the teen's leg before turning to leave. "If you're feeling up to it, you should try and get to class tomorrow, at least for a little bit. You wouldn't want to miss too much and I'm sure your friends want to make sure you're okay." With those parting words, Toshinori walked out of the room and went on his way to report back to his friend the detective to let him know that Midoriya was indeed awake and would be able to be questioned at some point in the near future. Recovery Girl kept Izuku back in the infirmary for the rest of the night, giving him a change of clothes for the next day so he could walk straight to class in the morning. After getting a green light to leave, Izuku found his way back to class and carefully slid the door open. He was almost unseen and would have gone unnoticed if not for Ochako sitting right near the door and seeing it open. "Deku, you're awake." All the heads in the room immediately turned in the direction of the shouting as the brunette dropped her stuff on the floor in her rush to hug the boy that had saved the class. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're okay." She seemed to realize what she was doing in front of everyone and promptly let you go. "Midoriya." That was the collective cry from the classmates with a few exceptions from the more eccentric classmates. Azui was the first to have truly spoken up when they had finished crowding their hero. "Midoriya, I generally say what's on my mind. I don't like to hold back how I feel. So I, on behalf of the entire class, thank you for being a great hero in our most dire time of need." The class went silent and immediately everyone stepped back a little bit before bowing all in unison, something that made him blush and rub the back of his head nervously. Hey, to be honest, I don't really know what happened that much. I was told that I was the one to hold off the villains while you all got away, but I don't remember much of it. He was doing his best to recount the events when everyone started speaking over each other again. It was nice to hear everyone's concern over him and to hear all of the praise, something that he had not heard much of. "Midori bro, that was pretty manly, the way you took that monster apart." I would have to agree, it was quite a mad banquet of darkness. I couldn't believe the way those villains ran away when you got smaller and started chasing after them. It looked like they were practically psing themselves. Kaminari was definitely a bit more vulgar than the others. This lasted until the bell went and the students were seated. While most students were still stuck on the idea of the class president, the few that had been the ones to carry their teacher away were curious as to who their substitute would be. "I wonder who Toru began but was silenced when a mummy man had walked into the classroom, his only distinguishable feature being the shaggy black mop of hair that hung from the top of his head. "Morning, we have some things to address today." Hobbling was a poor descriptor for how their teacher was moving and his students were visibly concerned for his health. Ida was the first to speak up to their teacher. "I am glad to see you are doing well, sensei. Although, is it really safe for you to be back teaching already?" Aizawa turned to them and shook his head before speaking. "My welfare isn't any of your concern because your fight has only just begun. You've been busy recently, so you've probably forgotten all about UA's sports festival which is only a week away." Izuku was surprisingly the one who was first to speak up about this, sensei. "I understand that it's important to keep this going, but don't you think it's a little too soon after an attack?" Aizawa knew that Midoriya was the only reason that a lot of the students were alive and had also taken a good bit of damage. "While I understand where you're coming from, it is necessary to show the world that UA's crisis management protocols are still in working order. Compared to previous years, there will be more than 5 times the amount of police officers than there have been in the past years. This is an event that cannot be cancelled over a few villains." Momo spoke up from the back to elaborate a little bit more. "The sports festival is one of Japan's biggest events. As far as the country is concerned, the UA Sports Festival has all but taken the place of the Olympics. It's also where top heroes will be watching as scouts for sidekicks." Aizawa coughed to stop her from continuing on and then spoke. "Naturally, this is a time where you'll be gaining invaluable experience. You'll face people who want to take your places and some who have unconventionally powerful quirks. It will be a true test of your resolve." The class continued and progressed on to lunch where all the students got up from their desks and were quick to start talking about their excitement over the announcement of the upcoming sports festival. "This has me so pumped up. It's a perfect way to show off our manliness." Izuku looked to the obvious source of noise as he put all of his stationery in his bag before getting up and walking over to Yaoyorozu. "Excuse me, Yaoyorozu, should we go talk to our candidates for our class's student council? We might not get another chance for a while and I'm not sure Aizawa-sensei wants to wait that long." The shorter boy stuttered a little as he spoke. Obvious little habits from when he hadn't gained his smoke powers quite yet and was bullied, yet he was eager to invite the candidate to the class cabinet. Of course, one should always be punctual when there are important matters to attend to. She seemed rather formal, but her smile showed how truly excited she was while practically glowing. The duo quickly followed the 1A crowd, a few of which had hung back and waited for their class leaders to eat lunch with. Ida was surprisingly excited and had already been speaking, so the class reps only caught in on the tail end of their conversation. To the ranks of heroes. Of course, we're in high spirits. Ida took a few breaths before realizing that the class reps had arrived and quickly silenced himself. Thank you for waiting for us. Are you ready? It would be a shame to end up missing our break because we got caught up. Momo was eager to have lunch because heroics training would be coming after, and she needed to make sure she had enough fats in her body to make it through the training. The clique of 6 students moved to the cafeteria where they could start eating, and once everyone was sitting, Izuku piped up and looked over at Ida. Ida, Yaoyorozu and I were tasked with selecting a student council for our class, and we wanted to ask if you would like to be our class treasurer to manage our class's events and maintain our budget. It's up to you on if you want to accept the position, but we thought you would be the #1 choice. The table was quick to go quiet while looking at Ida, who gave it a moment of thought before nodding. Of course, if you believe me to be worthy of the position, then I will endeavor to be the best I can be. Over at a table with Hagakure, Ashido, Todoroki and Ojiro, Todoroki had been listening and visibly flinched when Ida briefly mentioned, which caused some raised brows when his classmates pushed him on it, but he remained reclusive and said nothing. The Midoriya and Yaoyorozu were happy that their first candidate had accepted the proposal, but they still had a few more positions to be filled and needed to have it done sooner rather than later. Izuku stood up slowly and bowed toward Ida. Thank you for accepting. I know you will make a fine addition to the council. He was intentionally being as formal as possible for school politics-related topics, and then nodded before walking off to Todoroki's table where he stood facing down lengthwise. Excuse me. Ojiro and Ashido. Yaoyorozu and I were tasked with deciding on a student council, and we would like you to be a part of it. Ashido, we both thought that you would make a great historian. Your responsibilities would be taking pictures and videos. You would record our journey through high school and our fight to become heroes. Izuku gave her a moment to think while turning his head and facing his body toward Ojiro, who was also giving him his full attention. And for you, Ojiro, we were hoping you would be the secretary with responsibilities such as taking record of events, sitting in meetings, and helping the vice president and myself know about the problems that we may not hear about. Like I said before, you can refuse if you like. Just barely as he had finished, Mina jumped up and pumped her fist in the air. Heck yeah, I will. I've got to keep a camera on me and make sure to get a picture of To-Do smiling. I accept. Izuku nodded and bowed again before looking back up at the horned girl. Thank you very much, I am excited to see how you do. I'll collect a camera and some gear for you so you can get started right away. He turned and looked over to Ojiro again to give his reply, but could already feel what his response would be just by the way he was avoiding eye contact. I'm sorry, Prez, I have martial arts outside of school and studying. I don't have a flashy, powerful quirk, so I'd like to focus my energy more on that. I hope you understand, and thank you for considering me. He was obviously upset to be turning down the offer, but it was the right choice for him, and Izuku could feel that he really meant it, so he nodded and accepted it without an issue. Of course, doing everything you can to become a hero should come first. I've still got some stuff to settle, so I'll have to be off. Thank you. Izuku turned to walk away and continue to ask Shoji, but was blocked when All Might slid to a stop in front of him, a small hand-wrapped lunch held up close to his face. Oh, Midoriya. I found you. Wanna have lunch? The behavior got a couple ohs from the students, and Izuku nods before looking at the work he still had to do, but this wasn't something that could just be turned down. Of course, mind if I meet you in the teacher's lounge? I just need to finish up some council business. This got a quick nod before the behemoth of a man bolted off back to where he came from, so he could conserve as much time as possible. Izuku walked back to his table to collect his bag. Yaoyorozu, Ojiro didn't want the position and I have to go meet All Might. Mind asking Shoji if he is willing to accept the position? He didn't even give her time to respond besides a slight nod before he was back off to go speak to his them. In the teacher's lounge, All Might had become Small Might, and Toshinori already made some tea for them both and took a sip of his own as Izuku came in. "Ah, young Midoriya. Thank you for meeting. I know you must be busy assembling your council. Congratulations on being awarded the position. Although, the point of this meeting isn't about that." The frail-looking man stopped for a moment as he thought about the severity about what he would say next. "My time is slowly running out and I feel like you really helped me dodge a bullet. I was already at the end of my time limit when I got the news and came to the USJ. If they willingly attacked and they were confident enough that they broke into the school, the Nomu must have been strong enough to give me a run for my money. By passing the torch on to you, my power is naturally decreasing. I'm down to roughly 2 hours per day." Izuku was uncomfortable and his muscles tensed as he started thinking about a time without All Might as the symbol of peace to keep the villains in the shadows. Your goal is to become the smiling ray of hope, right? Then you really need to show everyone who you are. The UA Sports Festival is really important, and it will be the single biggest event you could sell yourself at. So, this is your chance to tell the world. The small man quadrupled in size, bulging his suit and clenching his fist in front of his body. "You are here.